The views and opinions expressed by tonight's guest and topic of discussion do not necessarily represent the official policy or position of Spaced Out Radio, Spaced Out Weekend, Spaced Out Radio Limited, its hosts, syndicated carriers, or anyone associated with this broadcast. Any rebroadcast, reproduction, or other use of this broadcast or podcast without the express written consent of Spaced Out Radio or Spaced Out Radio Limited is strictly prohibited. Listener discretion is advised. Are you experienced?
Stop right there!
From high atop the mountains of British Columbia to you listening around the world, this is Spaced Out Radio with host Dave Scott.
They let us play with all our toys, they let us think that we're big boys, they let us make a lot of noise, but we ain't rule the world. They let us think we're Superman.
You can follow us on our website, spacedoutradio.com, on iTunes and TuneIn. Follow Dave on Twitter at Spaced Out Radio, on Facebook at Spaced Out Radio Show, or on our YouTube channel, Spaced Out Radio Show.
I try to act so cool, but you know I'm just a fool for you. I will stop till I reach the top just to be there with you.
Dave, oh Dave, are you playing with Bigfoot and aliens again?
Dad, you gotta stop haunting the ghost. It's scaring them.
All right, seriously, put down the pointy sticks.
Oh, the deeper I fall.
Okay! Game on! Game on! Game on!
The password is...
All right.
Buckle up, space travelers. It's time to go for a ride on Spaced Out Radio. Mr. Bumblefoot, Dave is ready for liftoff.
I try to act so cool, but you know I'm just a fool for you.
Seriously, Dave? Really? Aren't you a little old for a tinfoil hat?
Hello. Toby. Bye-bye. Love you. Bye-bye.
Yeah, just please take your seat above us. We're with you. It's time for kickoff. Start. 2, 1. Boost ignition and liftoff. Okay.
I'm such a lucky guy, 'cause after all this time, it's like the deeper I go, the deeper I fall. The deeper I go, the deeper I fall.
Good evening and welcome to Spaced Out Radio tonight. I am your host, Dave Scott. It's great to have you along for the ride on this Friday, November 3rd, Saturday, November 4th, if you're on the East Coast or across the pond. Hope you had a great day and night. We are live right here in the Great White North on top of the snowy mountains of central British Columbia as we are here for your listening entertainment 7 days a week. We welcome in everyone listening in on WQEE 99 Rock the Key down in Newton, Georgia, home of The Walking Dead. We are live as well on the United Public Radio Network on 107.7 FM in New Orleans and over 160 countries around the world. We're also live on spacedoutradio.com, on Spreaker, KTLK, The Fringe FM, Renegade Talk Radio out of Las Vegas, the High Plains Talk Radio Network, and if you're listening in on Revolution Radio, remember the Double R Machine is a donation station financed by you, the valued listener. Head on over to freedomslips.com and donate today. Like our music? Get your horns up for Mr. Ron Bumblefoot THAL, formerly of Guns N' Roses, currently of Art of Anarchy and Sons of Apollo. Yes, Bumblefoot is the official music of this show. Now, we're all over social media. You can follow us on Twitter at Spaced Out Radio. You can give our Facebook page a like, Spaced Out Radio Show. On Instagram, you can follow me at Dave Scott, SOR. Be sure to subscribe to our brand new YouTube channel, Spaced Out Radio. No longer Spaced Out Radio Show. You got to go to Spaced Out Radio on YouTube. We're also on TuneIn. You can download and subscribe to our shows on iTunes. We're also on TalkStream Live and on iHeartRadio in the United States. Our website is spacedoutradio.com. Now, if you want to take part in this show, we do not take phone calls. You have to get into one of the chat rooms, either on Revolution Radio, Spreaker, or on Facebook at the SOR Space Travelers Club. Or you can hop on Twitter. Use the hashtag SpacedOutRadio. I will get your questions in there as well. Now, if you head to our website, for $5 a month, you can become a member of the SOR Space Travelers Club. You can also shop at our Spaced Out Radio store, read our news section, The Encounter Online, check out my latest blog, and if you've had a sighting you can't explain, or maybe an experience, fill out an SOR Sightlines report. Tim Doyle from UFO Seekers and Leslie Mitchell-Clark's Contact TV also has some great video viewing on our site as well. The first Friday of the month, we bring in our resident ET guru as our Keith Andrews stops by to answer your questions on anything extraterrestrial. If this is your first time hearing Keith, well, it's a tough show to get used to because much of what he says sounds so unbelievable. However, with his own personal experiences, this is one of those cases where he's had to learn much of this knowledge the hard way, by abduction and contact experiences, literally a lifetime's worth. Tonight, we're going to get into a couple of subjects with Keith. First, we're going to get into the influx recently of people being abducted, not contacted, but abducted. Abduction usually isn't a preferred method of contact. We are also going to get into all these downloads people keep talking about and saying that they're getting from extraterrestrials. What are they? Why are these people chosen? These downloads just don't make sense. Our Keith Andrews, welcome back to Spaced Out Radio, my friend. How are you?
Not bad at all, thanks, Dave, and thanks for having me.
Now, I do want to preface a couple things before we get going, Keith. Facebook today has blocked me from posting in my own groups, the groups that I run, because apparently I am spamming my own groups. So I could not put a post down tonight for our SOR Space Travelers. Elizabeth Anglin, thank you so much for bailing me out. Everett Themer, I know you tried as well. Okay, it is very, very tough in order to do this job on a social media site when you're being blamed for, spamming your own room. I don't know how that works. I don't understand it, but apparently I'm in Facebook jail until November 10th. I don't quite get that, but I will be free on November 10th. I hope the food is good. I hope the beds are comfy. It's ridiculous. It's absolutely ridiculous. And, I can honestly say between the website and Facebook, we may actually have to have another look at using Facebook because this is getting a little bit ridiculous on the way they are all of a sudden playing social media Nazis on people. I could understand if I was spamming 100, 200 groups, okay, and tagging people that have no interest in this show or follow this show. But it's my own damn room. How is that spamming? How is that spamming? This is what I would like to know. It's ridiculous. It's absolutely ridiculous. I don't know how many times I've complained, but Facebook has absolutely nobody that you can even complain to or talk to about it. Keith, I'm getting some feedback from your side here.
Okay, I have no idea why.
I don't know either.
How's that for a wonderfully obtuse answer?
Oh, yeah. I mean, it's ridiculous, and we want to give a little bit of a quick shout out here. Kevin and Kevin's beard. Apparently his young daughter is sitting with Dad tonight listening to old Spaced Out Radio. How you doing, young lady? I hope you've had a good night. Thank you for hanging out with your dad. As a dad myself, I can tell you point blank how important it is to spend time with my kids. So I'm glad you're doing that with your dad and sharing your time with us here on the Mighty SOR. Your dad's got a great beard. Do me a favor, give it a tug for us, because everybody on Spaced Out Radio wants to know, what a good beard tug on old Kev would sound like or feel like. So, nonetheless, thank you so much for Kevin bringing your daughter and introducing her to this show as well. Keith, what have you been up to, my friend?
Yeah, about 5'7" now. I'm heading for below it, but what the heck? Doing an awful lot of writing lately with the novel series I'm working on and the book on the races of the world. And literally about a week and a half ago, just opened up my own YouTube channel on R. Keith Andrews as well. So things have been getting a little hectic. And then, of course, trying to figure out what the heck why there is such a rapid climb in the frequency of abductions. But that one, at least, I got some definitive answers for.
Well, we are going to get into those in just a moment. Hey, I just want to mention to Facebook on the SOR Space Travelers group, okay? I am following your posts and everything. I cannot post in that room. All right, so don't be afraid. Just continue to put your questions in capital letters. I will be able to get in there and read your answers. So everything is status quo. Bill Cardwell, I could still get the messages on Messenger for the password for the night. That Maple Leafs logo that you've put on there is not pretty. It's not pretty at all. There's a reason why the Leafs haven't won the Cup since '67. So we'll just leave it at that for right now. But if you're on Facebook, make sure that you continue to post, because I am following the posts in the SOR Space Travelers group. Anyhow, thank you so much, bud. I appreciate that. Yeah, what is with the abductions lately, my friend? It seems like a lot of people are having experiences. I know I was taken just a couple of weeks ago, and it wasn't a pleasant experience, probably the most unpleasant experience that I have had. And you're seeing an influx in the people you talk to as well. What's up with that?
Well, the reality is that because the off-worlders are tracking the changes in society on the planet itself, we are back, mankind is back at that stage in history where it's on the verge of either tearing itself completely in half or evolving to the next level of evolution. And I'm talking societal evolution. So what they are now doing, the reason they've increased the frequency is they are checking the subquantum levels of metabolic change that is taking place on the planet based on the stresses that mankind itself is creating, and plus, of course, the impact that the increase in natural disasters, that added stress, is causing to the human genome. And yes, we are talking subtle changes. This is why the frequency has climbed so fast. But it is leaving people very disconcerted, very out in left field, if you will, trying to keep up with it. The hard part, of course, is that people don't, because we're talking abductions, it's not like people are getting invitations. They're some of the abductions I am finding are, they're simply rapid pickup. They don't have time to ask. For people that are actually normally contactees, it's kind of like, if you've got an emergency meeting, everybody gets yanked. That's where the big increase is coming from.
Maybe they're hired by Facebook.
Yeah, well, I got my own ideas on Facebook, and it's got absolutely nothing to do with with the off-worlders.
No, you never know. They could be tied into the two, Keith, because, let's face it. The ETs increase their abductions on humans over the last few weeks, and Facebook is blocking people like anything over the last few weeks. I'm a tinfoil hatter, my friend. There may be something to this, and if you are taking me seriously, please note the sarcasm.
Yeah, that stuff is just dripping off. Yeah, no, the sad part is, when you take a look, just a slight, shall we say, what's the word I'm looking for? Anyway, shift off of the whole ET thing. When you start looking at a company and the sponsored pages are being blocked by the people that are actually running the pages, are being blocked from the people that are actually running the pages, as a business, they are doing something that is extremely counterproductive and is going to result in different, and I'm not talking just SOR, I've heard of other groups where they've been blocked from their own page. They're going to drive their regulars away. And that's, they're going to drive the actual utilizers of it. Like, let's face it, you put through a lot of information through Facebook, right? And undoubtedly with everything, you've got advertising and what have you. So I look at it as a really bad business move. Where it comes to the off-worlders, the reason they're picking people up without warning, well, they're not getting a lot of warning about the sudden conflicts or the sudden warnings. For instance, when somebody fires a missile without warning the general public, which really confuses the off-worlders in the first place. Like, why would you warn somebody if you're going to shoot at them? But the sad reality of it is that with the off-worlders, they're picking people up because of wanting to track that genetic impact.
I can understand that. And this leads to Eric Cooper's question, why are more children these days seeming to be abducted?
Well, because the adults fight the information and struggle so hard to try and catalog it. Children, when you pick them up and you drop information in their lap and put them back, they'll spew out whatever comes out, and they don't analyze it. They don't try and figure it out. There's an old saying that literally goes from out of the mouths of babes. And it's not talking about, it's not necessarily talking about children, but it's referring to the innocent, the people that don't analyze. So you want information spread. It's kind of like the idea of, if you ever want a secret, if you ever want to spread gossip in a hurry, tell the person that won't keep a secret. Children, give them the information, they'll spew it, and they'll figure out whether or not it mattered later.
Great comment on Twitter by Muji Boy. He says, Dave, you were picked up by aliens just a few weeks ago, eh? How can you tell he's Canadian? That might explain the fork in a socket electroshock hair.
Oh, nice.
I think he's making fun of my hair.
If you couldn't get that by that comment, yeah.
Wow.
That's what it was.
Firing below the belt right off the bat. Above the belt on that one. Above the neckline. But either way, I know that as someone who has had a child who has been abducted, it is a scary, scary sign for any of us, Keith, to think that, this is happening to our children where it is absolutely uncontrollable. And let's focus on children here for the first little bit,
Absolutely.
How does a child know if they are being taken or it's just not a nightmare, because children are so prone to nightmares?
Well, that's the comical part, and I use the term comical rather loosely. I mean, I've got children of my own, but children don't differentiate. So instead of trying to figure out whether it had meaning, they run to mommy or daddy, and they go, "I had a nightmare, and this is what it was." And then the information is out. Nobody has filtered it. Nothing has changed. Right? They haven't tried to explain it, like the child hasn't. So mom and dad get the solid question, the solid information, and mom and dad can figure out what to do with it. And if you've got a child, especially if you're, and I'm going to use the term, it's a little overstated, but suffering from abductions, and your child gets taken, guaranteed you're going to look into what's going on, because it's going to hit way too close to home. But the child isn't going to hide it from you because it's a nightmare. Okay. Or maybe it wasn't a nightmare from their standpoint. Maybe it was a good run. But they still want to talk about the funny man with the big head and the wide eyes.
Is it because children are more pure with their thoughts, their energies, their blood? It hasn't been fixated with, drugs, alcohol, cigarette smoke, or, unicorns or anything along like that. Is that why children are such a reason for being abducted?
Well, that's only part of it, but we can safely rule out the issue of cigarette smoke because, well, frankly, that's in the air no matter whether you smoke the cigarettes or not. But as far as it being the alcohol and the drugs, it's not, in all fair, from everything I've seen, it's not so much that as the innocent side. Because the brain is not as well developed, it's easier to put a mask over. It's easier to put a memory screen over top of it so that the child doesn't get adversely affected. Plus, of course, the fact that the child, when it does come through, is going to blurt it out as a dream, so it's not as disconcerting to the kid as it is to the parent, to an adult. That's where the real focus is coming from.
No, and I can understand that, and I can really appreciate, the innocence and the pureness of children, because let's face it, they haven't been, chemicalized with a lot of television or internet or round teachings. Usually when extraterrestrials start taking children, around what age does that happen?
When they start taking children?
Yes.
In utero. Not all of them by any means, but it's literally been done that early. And usually what that boils down to is take the mother and the child at the same time. Like if the child's being left behind, like if the child is not being completely removed and taken by them, which does sadly happen. But where it comes to checking genetics and what have you, they'll grab the pregnant mother, test the child. They may not do much with the mother, but they'll test the child and put both of them back. And that is because of testing the evolutionary pathways. And we're talking societal evolution. Evolution itself, as far as the human race goes, is not as rapid as societal evolution impacts. Let's face it, society's going along fine, and then all of a sudden you have a natural disaster cut through. All of a sudden, society stands up and takes notice.
Catalina makes an interesting comment here in the Spreaker chat room. She says, first they implant, then bring the mother back at 10 weeks, take the fetus.
And that if they're going to take the fetus, that would be right. Not all pregnant mothers, the fetus of all pregnant mothers is not taken, or we wouldn't frankly have births. But she is right as far as right at the end of the first trimester. That's when the fetus will be taken, because that's the latest they can get away with it before mankind starts worrying about whether or not it was a spontaneous abortion. And therefore, it's less of a problem trying to, from the off-worlder standpoint, trying to cover it up. But she is right as far as the last point. If they're going to grab the fetus, it'll be done then. Usually, there are abnormalities in that on occasion, but that's the common ground, if you will.
Susan has a question. She says, Keith, some women are not deeply maternal. Is it possible that they made an agreement to share their eggs for hybridization and avoid physical pregnancy?
Absolutely. That certainly wouldn't be, that's not a common one, but it is absolutely a situation. Like I've talked to some people where the parents, although they are very maternal or very paternal, will agree to let the fetus go if they get to stay in contact with it, if they get the added connection, if you will, to the off-worlders, to that side of the experience. And by the way, just so that everybody understands, the off-worlders do not use this as a method of human birth control. It is not something that works quite that way for them. But those kinds of contracts do happen, absolutely. They're just not what you would call common.
So how do they decide, or is there a decision made on whom they take, Keith? Never mind just children, but I'm saying lineage, bloodlines. What are the ETs looking for? Or is it like random selection, like you're picking apples in the supermarket?
Well, it almost looks random, but it's really not. It depends on a number of factors. Let's settle in on just one scientific crew. They will have a specific type of, or a specific set of people, or a specific set of parameters for expanding that line for their particular research. Much, if you will, and this is going to sound, I'm sure that the listeners are not going to be happy with this comparison, but it's very much like operating a trap line. Okay, they literally pick people and they go, okay, I'm working with this bloodline, therefore it's these people, or possibly very closely connected if they're trying to expand their research a little. They may go just outside of the bloodline to really close friends that this kind of conversation goes on between, to see what the impact is on a satellite station. Sort of comparative sociology, if you will. Because you got to remember, from the off-worlder standpoint, because of where mankind is standing on the societal evolutionary path, what is happening is society is growing at such an incredible rate. This is first-hand information that these races are dealing with. And even if they've been doing this for thousands of years, society has gotten back to that stage where it's going to either tear itself completely apart, or at which point it goes back to square one, or it's going to pull itself together, work together, and now we have a spacefaring race. Okay, and once that happens, by the way, once we get past that break point, the abductions will stop. You will still have the scientific side of it, but it'll shift from abductions to, shall we say, doctor's visits, right? And they'll move on elsewhere if society gets past this break point. If it doesn't, Well, from the off-worlder standpoint, business as usual. From mankind's standpoint, let's dig ourselves back out of the rubble and try again. So it really is up to the human race at this point, whether or not, and this is going to sound really odd, but whether or not in the next 40, 50 years, society is going to see a drop in the abduction levels, or whether mankind is going to go right back to where it was.
Is there a change or a difference in abduction that, say, somebody would experience, say, 50, 60 years ago, compared to what it is happening today? And I'm thinking like the famous case of Betty and Barney Hill leading up to what people are having done or happened to themselves today.
Well, there's definitely a major shift in the rationality behind it. At the time of Betty and Barney Hill, mankind was just entering the technology age. Like, they'd just gotten through that break, and therefore they started picking up people that were in that field that were causing, like in Betty and Barney Hill's case, there was an interesting situation there where you were dealing with, and the aliens didn't see it as a problem, but humans did at that time really heavy. They were dealing with cross-nationality relationships, which created one massive problem for society, but it did draw the attention of the off-worlders to take a look at it. Mm-hmm. Okay. I just love questions like this. I'm hoping this is, I don't know if I'm hoping this is a joke or what the story is. Craig in Spreaker has asked, how do I get abducted by a hot humanoid ET?
Yeah, that's a good question. That is a very good question. There's nothing sarcastic about that whatsoever, because I have wondered that myself.
Well, it sort of depends on your definition of hot. I mean, the last thing you want to do is get picked up by a fire elemental, and trust me, they're warm. But I don't honestly know if there's actually a formula for that. Sad to say, the reason I said I don't know if that was supposed to be a joke or not is my sense of humor is not necessarily, shall we say, well developed, in case you hadn't noticed.
Yes, well, I can honestly say I agree with Craig on that one. I think that's Craig's probably most logical question he's ever asked in the chat rooms. Honestly. I'll defend you there, Craig, you fellow Canuck. I'll defend you on that one. But seriously, do we have a choice on who abducts us?
Well, here's the kicker. If you're being abducted, you're not getting a choice to start with. If you're being contacted or invited, then you may have some say in the matter. Probably after the first or second pickup. But, by the nature of it in the first place, okay, the fact of it being an abduction means nobody's asking for anybody's permission. So, but where it comes to, once you're at the point of being a contactee, meaning a voluntary connection, then my best suggestion is ask. But you may have to explain to them your definition of what you consider hot. Because some people find that the really intellectual people are the hottest thing on the planet. Others take a look at it and go, no, it depends on what the body looks like or what the face looks like. Yeah.
I get that. I like Eric's comment. He says he'll have to write an alien pickup lines book.
Well, somebody will. I am not a good one for it.
Me either. But the whole point is, there are people who get abducted by multiple different species. Sometimes it's the Greys, sometimes it's mantids, other times it's reptilians, maybe it's humanoids or whoever it is. Why do so many races, or let me rephrase that for a second, Keith. When someone is taken, are they not branded by a certain race that say, okay, this person gets taken by Greys, that person gets taken by Mantids, or is it just a free-for-all on who can take you?
Oh, no, the branding is a little overstated, but you're on the right track. Most of the time, they are tagged, and it's like, this is my experiment, or this is my research project. Keep your grub hooks off. The ones that tend to get picked up by multiple different races are actually tagged by the consortium itself. Okay, and if the consortium tags somebody, then they will determine who is actually able to deal with that individual, but it is very clearly multiracial at that point. Okay, every now and again, obviously, you have, if you will, claim jumping, but for the most part, like, for instance, it'll be one group of Greys that pick, if it's Greys that are grabbing you, it'll be one group that is picking you up. You won't have multiple different Greys picking you up.
Okay, well, I'll step up on the table here, no pun intended, and say that the last time I was taken, just a couple of weeks ago, that was a type of Grey I had never seen before. The Greys who took me before that were taller and thinner than the Greys that took me the first time, where they were short, and they were the ones who, they were almost childlike. So yeah. I've been taken by, I've seen 3 different, or actually, if I add in Carl, I've seen 4 different types of Greys.
Well, you've seen 4 different skeletal configurations, but the tall, gangly ones and the short, childlike ones, those are your 2 primary sizes. Okay. The short ones are your true scientists. Those are the guys that go in, they're the ones that do most of the experimentation. But now what I missed there, and pardon me for being a little bit half deaf here, I think, but it was the ones that picked you up just the other day there, just a couple of weeks back. Those were the tall, gangly ones that grabbed you?
Recently?
Yeah.
No, about a year ago I got the tall, gangly ones.
Right. And it's just been recently that the short guys have picked you up?
When I was first taken, that I recall, in September of 2014, there was 3 little Grey dudes.
Right.
Okay. The second time I recalled being taken, it was like a taller, I remember that I was looking at them face to face, and I'm 5'9", so they were around 5'9", around there. Okay. Right. This last time that I was taken just a couple of weeks ago, this guy was a short little Grey dude who was hunchbacked, and his head and neck were well protruding away from the body.
Right. Yeah. So what you're dealing with, the short little guys, frankly, there are various different ones, various different configurations. Very much like different nationalities, much as they don't all look the same, you get Japanese and you get Westerners, they look very different. They're both human. The fact that you're getting picked up by different configurations may well have been that they picked you up for a different set of tests. Okay. That would be my best bet on it. I mean, I'll certainly look into it and see what I can find out, but the odds are what you're dealing with is a different set of tests, and let's face it, not all doctors are as congenial or as socially adept as other ones.
So is there, and I'll re-ask this question then, how does one know if they're being taken by multiple species, like I've been taken by multiple Greys? Right. Okay, but what about multiple species, like, say, the Greys, the reptilians, the mantids, the humanoids? And we do have people who are going through that. Are the majority of them using imagination when this happens, or is it really happening that there are certain people out there that continue to be taken by every race that can get their hands on them?
there are definitely some people that get to that point, that are being taken by multiple races. Like I said, most of the time that's a consortium issue. But some people just have that genetic anomaly that everybody wants to take a peek. It's kind of like, you got to take a look at this blood work. Well, I'm not going to trust your blood work for it. I want to do my own. I'm certainly not going to say that the greater majority of people are using their imagination, but there is no doubt that some people, and I do caution people on this one, when I say some people are using their imagination and just saying, I got taken, that does happen, but let us make sure that we default to the idea of it is quite possible, if not probable, that they're really being taken. Because one of the biggest beefs I've got, and I know you've got the same one, and so do a number of other people, that in the UFO community, the last thing we need is for people going, oh, you're just imagining you were taken. There's enough of that going on already. But the reality is that it's not a common thing for somebody to be taken by multiple different races. The one difference in that, the one variation in that I will quite readily stand by, is it is actually quite common, if you're being picked up by Greys, that you'll see NORADs. And NORADs are the tall blonde people.
All right, I want to get to Elizabeth's question here. She says, question for our Keith. I think she said her Keith, not our Keith. Anyways, she says, I just let the dog out. It's a bit cloudy, but you can see certain stars and the moon, very thin clouds. And it looked like a star had a ring around it. Then the ring moved, and it was just a ring around a black circle. When I looked forward into the direction it was going, there was another ring with a blank circle. Was that two cloaked ships or just a trick of my eyes?
The best way I can put it, not having been there, frankly, it's probably a trick of the eyes, but you have to look at the light pattern. If the light pattern moved away in a static fashion, it may have been a trick of the eyes. If it all of a sudden pulled a 90-degree left, then the odds are you were looking at cloaked ships. It's a little, as I'm sure you can appreciate, it's a little difficult to say for certain which one it was. But the usual giveaway is if it's gone in a totally, if you will, unlikely direction, if the light all of a sudden ended up someplace completely out of trajectory from where it was, the odds are it wasn't that it wasn't the star.
Let's get to another question here. This one from Craig. Do hybrids know they're hybrids? And how do we know they're hybrids?
Well, do they know they're hybrids? And this one I got into trouble with because of a comment I made, but very, very seldom do hybrids actually know they're hybrids. The best way to liken that is if you go back into the 40s and 50s and even into the 60s, very few people that were adopted ever found out they were adopted until decades later. Okay, so no, this concept that if you're a hybrid you absolutely know is absolutely wrong. Okay, and there is one person in particular that flat out made the claim that all of them know, and they don't. Which I'm sure you can appreciate on that end. How we know they're hybrids, that becomes a little bit tricky, because depending on who they took after, sometimes the look is just completely off as far as a standard human goes. To me, it's very simple. They feel different. But for most people, there will be something different about the way that they carry themselves, or there's something very subtle about a difference that just doesn't seem quite right. This doesn't mean, by the way, that everybody that looks a little different than you is a hybrid. But it's sort of one aspect may not be enough to do it. Okay, so, but the way you tell, usually it's because of the way they carry themselves, or a slight difference in what you see, and it won't be a blatant difference on the whole. Sorry, mind you, once you've seen one, once you know you're dealing with one, it's usually pretty easy to spot a similar hybrid.
Well, this leads to Daryl's question, who says, how do we know we're not hybrids?
Well, sad to say, you don't. However, we can safely assume that not everybody on the planet is hybrid. Okay. But one of the obvious issues that hybrids quite often go through, it's not a case of they feel out of place. Lots of people feel out of place and they're perfectly normal humans. But if they clearly if something clearly does not connect, if they have massive problems dealing with the concepts of certain aspects of life, especially the more subtle social interactions, that can be an indicator, but it's not the only one. The other thing you have to look at is metabolic modifications, extreme immunities or sensitivities to drugs, and I'm talking to man-made drugs. These are all indicators that in and of themselves don't make a lot of difference, but when you start getting multiple markers, you start wondering.
All right, let's move on to Susan's question. She says, back in the 1960s, her father was a commercial pilot. He and the crew were buzzed by a craft somewhere over Wyoming. Does a random sighting make a person more prone to later abduction?
No, but it certainly makes them more prone to later sightings. The fact that you've seen one does not automatically set you up to be taken, but it certainly pre-organizes you or pre-alerts you to other people, to other sightings, because now you're looking for them. That's the easiest way to look at that. But just simply seeing one does not mean you're lined up for an abduction run.
Well, what would constitute a run then? Let's say there's a lot of people, such as myself, Keith. The easy answer is to say this is that, you were taken as a child, but you just didn't know. But there's a lot of people who are in their 30s, 40s, 50s, who are being taken for what they feel is the first time. Why would somebody be taken at that age rather than at a childish age and have the experience through life?
Okay. Well, there's a couple of reasons. Number one, I agree with you. This idea that, the fact you're being taken now says you're being taken since you were a kid. No. There's a number of things that may trigger it. Okay. One of which, the issue going back to this sighting thing, if it makes a dramatic enough impact on you that it alters your behavior, then you may well get tagged. They may well pick you up to find out what that metabolic shift was. Many times it's a question of you get into a field that all of a sudden puts you right smack in the spotlight. Like, for instance, in your case, Dave, somebody like you, even if you hadn't been taken as a child, and in all fairness, I haven't talked to you about that, so I really don't know. But because of your prominent placing in the metaphysical, in the UFO field, and your push for finding out the answers and for bringing awareness to so many different peoples, that in and of itself is grounds in certain research centers, circles, to grab you to find out what it was that got your attention. And that's where they start going after the memory side of it and find out just exactly what was going on. And they will track past memory and past markers to see if you guys were looked at, maybe generations back. Because you got to remember, their genetic filters, when they do genetic testing, they're going a lot deeper than what mankind does.
We got about 6 minutes left before we have to take our first break. Let's get to Craig's question here. He's saying, what is the difference between a hybrid and a hybrid?
This is actually, quite frankly, the first I've heard of it, and I'm betting that it's one of two issues. Assuming that a hybrid is an actual term, that would be indicative of, if you will, a hybrid being implanted, like the human being implanted, being turned into a hybrid, and then the fetus, the child, being brought to term through standard human medical procedures. Okay, instead of being removed and raised on board, they'll let them get born right through. And that is that's the other half. It's the first time I've heard the term, but it makes total sense. That would be the other half of the hybridization program, where you raise the child in a human culture, in the human community. So that hybrid has the genetic tracking from the off-worlder, but has the strong cultural backing of the human side.
Mm-hmm. Let's move on to John's question. Are there hybrids conceived through natural means? Example, one parent being alien and the other human?
Well, if I understand the question right, the answer would be yes. Okay. All hybrids are not planned. Every now and again, what will happen is a different race will find, because of the human alien interaction, they will fall for each other, right? And net result, you end up with a kid, and nobody sanctioned it, nobody scheduled it. It just kind of worked out that way. The other issue in the minor hybrids is a hybrid that is living on Earth, and this is quite normally with one that doesn't know they're a hybrid, falls in love with another human, and all of a sudden you got a quarter alien. And this is a natural progression, if you will. Make sense?
Yeah, kind of. I've heard of, and let me just state this. I have heard of humans being taken and having sex with female aliens up above. Like men from here having sex up above with female aliens. The natural way, if we could put it that way. But for some reason, I've never heard of it happening the other way around.
Well, a lot of that may well be. There's two possible factors. One being social programming on the side of humans, where they don't necessarily talk about it. And the other side of it being that it's not as frequent. Where it happens the other direction. But that's where you'll get the discrepancy, if you will.
Well, that makes sense. Let's get it. Let's try and get one more question in. This one comes from Adam. Are full-blood aliens living among us in disguise? And if so, how can we tell them apart?
Well, the answer would be yes, but not exactly in disguise. There are full-blood aliens on this planet that are full-blood aliens. They just happen to look human. Like, for instance, if you've got a Mobian living on the planet, you're not going to know the difference. You're just plain not going to. Many NORADs are, the smaller NORADs, can walk amongst humans. You'd never know they were an alien by their behavior. When we take a look at some of the ancient races, you take a look at dwarves, right? And quite literally, there are literal dwarves, and I'm talking the ones that live for several hundred years, that are walking amongst mankind right now, and you'd never know them from anybody else, okay? Because they look close enough to the smorgasbord of human appearances that people don't pay attention to it. You know, and of course it does boil down to whether the individual that we're referring to has figured out how to blend, if you will, how to behave properly.
These hybrids do, and we only got about 25 seconds, these hybrids, do they try and stay in more populous areas so they could blend in easier, or are you going to find them out in the local farming community or wherever?
That literally boils down to the individual. They can end up anywhere, depending on personal choice. Some will try and blend in because they really want to be part of this incredible mix of humanity. Because, I mean, the diversification of humans is incredible. And if you get past the fear of who's what color and who you voted for, humans are an incredible race.
All right, Keith, I'm going to get you to hold on right there. We are going to step out for our first break of the night. Our Keith Andrews is back. The first Friday of every month, Keith joins us with the ET Connection, where we go over everything extraterrestrial. Line up your questions, because Keith is going to be taking them right after. This show's about you and learning about maybe your own personal experiences, so I highly suggest you listen on in and never be afraid to ask any questions if you're in the chat rooms or on Twitter. You are listening to Spaced Out Radio. I am your host, Dave Scott. We'll be back right after this.
365 days a year, we're in the field, investigating UFO sightings, talking to alien abductees, and visiting secret military locations like Area 51. We're UFO Seekers, official partner of Spaced Out Radio. Follow our daily search for the truth at ufoseekers.com or like us on social media. Catch us on Spaced Out Radio every third Monday of the month as we discuss Area 51, UFOs, and more. And also, don't forget to subscribe to us on YouTube.
From coast to coast to coast, Blacklight Uncharted is taking on the paranormal across Canada. From ghostly hauntings to the UFOs flying above in conjunction with MUFON Canada, we're closely investigating what's going on in the northern skies and checking out the apparitions that walk among us. Check out our videos right here at spacedoutradio.com. We want to know your thoughts, we want to hear your experiences, and we want you to share your stories. The answers are out there, and we intend to find them.
Would you like to become one of our space travelers? All you have to do is click on the Space Travelers icon at spacedoutradio.com. For only $5 a month, you can get access to some great prizes, as well as private monthly shows, newsletters, and a members-only section on our website. Become a space traveler today.
It's paranormal news at its finest. Welcome to The Encounter. At spacedoutradio.com, The Encounter online is SOR's trusted news source for everything weird and strange going on around the world. This is news editor Eric Markham. Our team of journalists are scouring the planet for those strange stories that rarely make the mainstream. No fear-mongering or fake news here. Head over to spacedoutradio.com and encounter The Encounter.
Want to learn more about aliens, cover-ups, conspiracies, cryptids, and the paranormal? All you have to do is tune in S4 as we take over the Spaced Out Radio night, starting at midnight Pacific, 3 a.m. Eastern, each and every Saturday night, right after Spaced Out Saturdays. Hi there, this is Eric Cooper from Forest Moon Paranormal. Join me, Corey Ruiz, and friends as we discuss the hot topics of the night. It's fun, entertaining, and as dark as the night. Find us at spacedoutradio.com.
Hey, this is Canadian Paranormal Investigator Mike Moore. The third Wednesday of every month, I'll be teaming up with Dave Scott to bring you Ghosts of the Great White North. Each month, we will bring on guests from across Canada to discuss their ghostly encounters. Canada is a paranormal hotbed with stories you've never heard, so we're going to bring them to you. So get comfy on your Chesterfield, grab a donut, and join us, eh?
Are you an experiencer? Have you had run-ins with strange creatures you can't explain? ETs, Dogman, Bigfoot, werewolves? They're enough to scare the daylights out of anyone. Hi there, I'm Butch Witkowski from your 4-Cop. And on the last Monday of every month, you can listen to me and the host, Dave Scott, talk about the weird and the strange being reported on Spaced Out Radio. I'm going to bring my investigations and sources, you bring your experiences, and we'll figure out the rest together. Strange Days on Spaced Out Radio. Come tune us in at spacedoutradio.com.
Want a place to share your experiences without feeling judged? We have the place for you. If you've experienced sightings or contact with ETs, ghosts, cryptids, or UFOs, and you'd like someone to confidentially look into the matter, just fill out an SOR Sightlines report. Our goal is to help you get the answers you need to the experiences you've had with our professional team of researchers. Your information stays 100% confidential. The SOR Sightlines report. Fill out your experience today only at spacedoutradio.com.
Psychic Sundays, spiritual communication, ET contact, Sasquatch in your backyard. We will have it all on Cosmic Passport with me, Elizabeth Anglin. Each Sunday, starting at 9 p.m. Pacific, midnight Eastern, at spacedoutradio.com, I will take you on a journey of enlightenment. The goal is learning from the soul on out. We'd love it if you joined our experience. Cosmic Passport, heard Sundays at spacedoutradio.com.
Are you interested in advertising on Spaced Out Radio? Head to our website at spacedoutradio.com and click on our advertising tab. There, you will find an assortment of ways you can get your product out there with us, from radio commercials to banners and social media. Have a product you like our hosts to endorse? We can do that too. Visit spacedoutradio.com for more details.
From British Columbia to Northern California, Pacific North Weird has Cascadia covered. Check out our feature videos at spacedoutradio.com, where I, Vincent Zunza, and my super sleuth partner Alexandra Sullivan track down the weird and strange stories from around the Pacific Northwest, from Bigfoot to Mel's Hole and everything in between. This is what makes life exciting. So why report the normal when we can report the Pacific North Weird right here at spacedoutradio.com.
Don't have time to listen to Spaced Out Radio live? Wherever you are, the car, the office, the shower, or even if you're traveling, we're right here for you. Each Spaced Out Radio show can be found on iTunes, TuneIn, and on our YouTube channel, Spaced Out Radio Show. It's the perfect way for you to catch up on our shows. For more information, just head over to our website, spacedoutradio.com, and tune in to us today.
Welcome to Spaced Out Saturdays with me, Dave Cruz from Beyond the Strange. Our weekly feature on spacedoutradio.com will take you around the world discussing everything from the paranormal to the latest conspiracies from the top guests in their fields. We won't leave any story uncovered. Spaced Out Saturdays at spacedoutradio.com, starting 9 p.m. Pacific, midnight Eastern.
The views and opinions expressed by tonight's guest and topic of discussion do not necessarily represent the official policy or position of Spaced Out Radio, Spaced Out Weekend, Spaced Out Radio Limited, its hosts, syndicated carriers, or anyone associated with this broadcast. Would you like to connect with us? Head to spacedoutradio.com for all your latest show info. And hit us up on Twitter using the hashtag SpacedOutRadio. Now, back to Dave Scott and SOR.
Welcome back to Spaced Out Radio tonight. I am your host, Dave Scott. Great to have you with us. Tomorrow night for Spaced Out Saturdays, Dave Cruz is in the house. And then on Sundays, Elizabeth Anglin with Spaced Out Sundays Cosmic Passport. Each show gets going at 9 p.m. Pacific, midnight Eastern Time at spacedoutradio.com. We want to welcome in everyone listening in on WQEE 99 Rock the Key down in Noonan, Georgia, home of The Walking Dead. We are live as well on the United Public Radio Network, 107.7 FM in New Orleans, and over 160 countries around the world. Good to have you with us as well. We are also live on KTLK, The Fringe FM, Renegade Talk Radio out of Las Vegas, and if you're listening in on Revolution Radio, remember the Double R Machine is a donation station financed by you, the valued listener. Head on over to freedomslips.com and donate today. Bill Cardwell has set the password for tonight in the SOR Space Travelers Club. Epirogenesis. Epirogenesis is your password. Make sure you use it wisely, space travelers, as Bill sets the password each and every night right here on the mighty SOR. Now, if you want to follow us on social media, you can do so on Twitter at Spaced Out Radio. Use the hashtag Spaced Out Radio in case you want to connect live with us during the show as well. You can also give our Facebook page a like, Spaced Out Radio Show. And join us for live chat, the SOR Space Travelers group on Facebook. We're on Instagram, Dave Scott, SOR. We have a brand new YouTube channel we'd like you to sign up on. It is called Spaced Out Radio, no longer Spaced Out Radio Show. You can skip the episodes on that one. Come over to ours. And we're also on iHeartRadio in the United States. TalkStream Live. You can tune us in on TuneIn, download and subscribe to our shows on iTunes. Our website is spacedoutradio.com, where we have a plethora of features for you, including joining the SOR Space Travelers Club for $5 a month. You can also shop at our Spaced Out Radio store, rock out to some Bumblefoot, watch videos from the likes of UFO Seekers and Contact TV, and read The Encounter online. Everything at spacedoutradio.com. The first Friday of the month, we have our Keith Andrews in for the ET Connection, as Keith joins us talking everything extraterrestrial on the first Friday of every month. Keith, welcome back. We appreciate you being here.
I love being here. Thanks for having me, and thanks so much for all of the listeners that are coming in. The questions coming in today are incredible.
Absolutely. And that's why we love doing this show, is the audience really gets involved. Let's start off on Twitter with Andrew, who is asking, what does a very bright, strobing white light possibly mean? A light which seems to appear out of nowhere.
More often than not, it literally is a strobe, or is a probe, rather. If it just pops out of nowhere, it is in all likelihood a probe that's come in, is doing a quick scan of the area, and what they'll be doing is checking electromagnetics or biomagnetic fields and the differences in them, and then they're gone. Those ones are very seldom the ones that actually pick anybody up. Because let's face it, if you're coming in to grab somebody, you don't bother announcing the fact you're coming in. But that's what that usually is.
Let's move on to another question here. Eric is asking, what's your estimate of ratio of hybrids per human?
Oh, heavens, if you hit 0.5%, you're doing well. There really aren't that, there are... And I'm presuming now I'm talking about 0.5% that are still earthbound. And if you hit 0.5%, you're hitting a staggering number, because that is probably so far overstated. Because you'll find that it's higher in urban areas than it is in the rural, right? Because let's face it, there's only so much that you need information on. But it's easier to pick out from the hybridization standpoint. It's easier to collect people from an area where there's a lot of people, right? Because let's face it, you take a look at downtown Toronto or downtown Vancouver or downtown New York. People that are weird, people in LA that are just, humans are a little odd anyway. Dropping a hybrid in there that doesn't quite know what they're doing is going to blend in rather nicely. You drop somebody in, and I think it's St. Louis that has the Mardi Gras. Nobody's going to notice.
New Orleans.
That's New Orleans. Okay. I'm not necessarily, shall we say, the most socially adept individual here, in case you hadn't figured that one out. you know. But it's certainly easier to hide a hybrid in a population where there's a lot of people, because humans just don't pay much attention on the whole.
I understand that, but when it comes to these hybrids or aliens that could be masking themselves here, to me it would make way more sense to be hiding in a city with a lot of population and diverse cultures and looks than it would be to, say, some smaller farming community or logging community where it's a little bit more redneck and gruff. You know what I'm saying?
Oh yeah, and this is exactly what I was referring to. You'll have a higher number in the bigger cities because they're easier to hide. If all of a sudden there's an oddity in a logging town, well, let's face it, they're going to stand out like a sore thumb. And if you're trying to maintain a low key, that's not a good place to try and do it. If you're trying to blend in. But that's why they use why you'll find the higher numbers in the more urbanized areas. That, and of course, the other little issue that is just simply a matter of functionality. If you're dealing with hybrids, the hybrid side, the off-world side of them, is so much further technologically advanced. At least in an urban developed city, you've got some technology they can fake it with. You throw them out where everybody's still milking cattle first thing in the morning and drawing their water by hand. Talk about being completely like a fish out of water. That's the big issue that you look at there. Make sense?
Absolutely. Let's move on to a pair of questions from Craig. His first one is, are some people protected from being abducted, or would that be a soul-based protection?
That would actually be a combination, but nobody is technically protected from if you're asking, is there some sort of a contract that somebody's made a deal and said, oh, don't take this person. From a human to off-world standpoint, the answer is not that I'm aware of. There may well be, but I'm just not aware of them. I mean, heck, I didn't start out where I am by accepting the idea of going. That was definitely not on my list of things to do. At least not from a conscious standpoint. On a soul level, it is quite probable, especially in today's world, that a given individual has said, hey, I don't care about this whole off-world thing. Yes, I want to know about it when I get down there, but I am not being taken. Right? You want to take me, you come and set it up, and I'll go voluntarily, but I'm not being abducted. Right? But in all fairness, it's actually not that common of a thought line on the other side. The issue of, well, I don't want to be abducted. It's kind of like most people, when they come down here, do not go with, I don't want to be murdered this lifetime. Although, quite frankly, I know a few people that they really should look into that, because the last several lifetimes, that's how they've gone out.
All right, let's get to Craig's second question. Are these hybrids that are here being used to train and teach people in the dream and ship schools?
The answer is yes. And the reason for that comes right into that cultural hybridization program. By getting a hybrid to teach in the schools as to the evolution of the socioeconomic interaction between humans and off-worlders, or between humans and ancient races, they absolutely require a teacher that understands both cultures. And that's what the hybridization program was for in the first place, was to build the cultural interpreters. That's the important fact from that standpoint. So yeah, they absolutely put them for that use.
Here's an interesting question. Say for hybrids or camouflaged aliens that are currently on Earth and interacting with humans, are they allowed to admit what they really are?
Allowed to? The answer is yes. And there's an internal safeguard there. If somebody walks up to you and says, by the way, I'm a hybrid, what's your first thought? And I mean, you're pretty open-minded, you know. But the majority of people, when you tell them, oh, I think I'm probably a hybrid, they are going to flat out, for the most part, even if they're involved in the UFO community, on the whole, they're going to look at you and go, yeah, that's a cute thought. You're spending way too much time watching science fiction movies. Because humans would rather believe that it's not possible than to believe it is. Like I was just noticing in the chat room, there was, and I've just got to scan back a bit, but there was a comment somebody made here that they didn't think that hybrids were possible because of interspecies complications. Because of trying to crossbreed. And, the funny part there is, much as that makes sense, the reality is you take a look at the Cabot, right? Which is a human-generated cross between a rabbit and a cat. Okay, two different species, but they did manage to bring them together. And let's face it, the off-worlders, especially the Greys, their technology for making hybrids is a whole lot more advanced than what mankind's is for understanding them. Make sense?
Absolutely. Absolutely. Let's move on here. Adam is saying, are Native American or indigenous people then hybrids?
Oh, no. Some of them may well be. The North American Indian, Native American, there's all sorts of discrepancies we can go into on the term, so we're not going to bother. They're human. Yes, some of them are hybrids, but they are not, as an overall group, some colony of hybrids. They're just as human as the next person, the next color of person down the road. There are Orientals in, I think it's southern Japan, but I might be backwards. It might be northern Japan. There are Japanese that are well over the 6 foot mark on average. They're just another human. Now, some of them, like I said, may well be hybrids. Wouldn't be a surprise. But on the whole, they are just simply put another color, another evolutionary nationality of human. I think that's about as straightforward as I can get on that one.
So how would... I know we asked this in the first hour, but I'm going to ask it again just out of curiosity. Maybe something else, kind of tweaked your brain a little bit. But are we able... I'm surprised that you said, number one, that any hybrids or extraterrestrials are allowed to reveal themselves if they're asked and say, yeah, I'm an alien. I can do that. That actually boggles my mind. I would think it's much like the ghostly realm where, they're really not supposed to show us who they are. You know what I'm saying?
I understand what you're saying, and the reason that it's, so to speak, okay, but understand they are warned about the cautions. They are given a list of what may happen, not the least of which, in certain parts of the world, if you tell somebody that you're a hybrid, they will assume you're nuts and you will be right in line for a lobotomy right then. Even in today's world. So you are told about the dangers. Is it a secret you have to keep? No, but it might be in your best interest for the moment, considering the side effects. Because if you tell somebody you're a hybrid, assuming they believe you, the first obstacle you've got is most people, even in the UFO community, are going to go, yeah, right. Sure, like, where's your proof? And most hybrids won't have proof because most of the hybrids don't come up with some sort of bizarre ability beyond the normal evolutionary thing. Okay. Secondly, if they do believe them, well, there are communities where you all of a sudden end up disappearing off the map because the local human scientists want to see just exactly how you tick and how they can turn that into a weapon or into an asset, as compared to you being just a normal person to get to continue contributing to society in a normal fashion. Okay, that's where they get the caution. So most hybrids won't say it, even if they know. But let's be clear, very few actual hybrids know they're hybrids. Okay, it's not like you've got a tag on your foot saying, by the way, I'm half Pleiadian and I'm half human, or my father was actually my father was actually Orion. You just don't get the lineage handed down for you.
I understand that, but I can see the hidden description behind the hybrids. But for extraterrestrials that are on this planet, walking amongst us, I mean, let's face it, there was talk that in the 60s and 70s that there were aliens walking in and out of casinos in Las Vegas after parking their ships at Area 51. As sci-fi as that sounds, do we know it's true or not? No, we don't. But there has apparently been eyewitness accounts of it happening. Nonetheless, if there are aliens walking amongst us right now, and whether they are wearing face masks or body masks, or, it's something like out of the movie Men in Black, then that is pretty eerie, and I would be surprised that they would be allowed to announce their presence to everyday people, even though everyday people would probably laugh or snark it off.
Oh, now here's the kicker. I was asked if hybrids were allowed, not if the full-blowns were. Okay, hybrids on the whole, if they're out and about, don't look that much different from humans, and they don't, on the whole, stand out in any bizarre fashion. Off-worlders are certainly, unless they have been trained very well and by the very nature of their own genetics, they look like a human. Like I said, NORADs wouldn't be a surprise if they've been trained to interact with humans. Would not be a surprise to see them out and about, to have one mingle out and about. Okay, it's first-hand research. Okay, or first-hand social, intersocial, interspecies socialization. But when you're talking the actual full-blooded aliens, the full-blooded ones, no, on the whole, they are not allowed out in public, and for exactly the reason that, if they were out in public, there would be problems. It's the hybrids that because of the nature of it and the fact that most hybrids don't know they're hybrids. So quite often, and this goes back to that issue of, are all people that claim to be hybrids hybrids? No, they aren't. They may be very creative. They may feel like they are in the wrong body, like many people that end up swapping from male to female or vice versa. They feel like they're wrong, so they do something about it. Okay. But there's, the only safeguard to the hybrids that know that they're hybrids is they're warned of what the side effects can be depending on where they are. And then if they end up getting diced, well, because there's enough proof, that there are aliens among us, that, I mean proof as in physical proof that hasn't been wiped off the map by some agency or by some military group or government, that, it's out there anyway. You're not going to do any damage as an individual. And humans still look at the whole concept on the whole as it's a neat idea. but they're still tossing between them as to whether it's a real thing. You know, regardless of the amount of evidence that we've got out there that is, to me, pretty black and white.
All right, let's move on to another question from Craig. He is asking, what would be the major message from these Mobian, Nordic, and Pleiadian aliens?
Oh, that's the easy part. Get along. You know, you're all human. You're all on the planet. You're all living on a planet that you are, as a species, either through neglect or through stupidity. And I chalk greed and stupidity myself up to the same thing where it comes to planetary survival. But you're all responsible for keeping the planet alive. So quit trying to kill each other and start working together. You'll make better headway. You know, the projects that mankind is working on, when you've got multiple nations working on the same project, it is an absolutely irrefutable fact that if people are not ducking from bullets and sharing information, the technology advances faster if they put the same emphasis on it that they put on trying to kill each other. So the major message is, you're all denizens of the same planet. You're all primarily, you know, the most humans on the planet are literally human. That's just the way they are. Get along. You know, worship who you will, call it whatever you will, but quit trying to kill each other, and for pity's sakes, quit trying to starve each other out and poison the planet all in one shot.
All right. Well, let's keep it to aliens here, Keith. No offense. You know, we all understand that. You know, I'm not trying to be insulting here or anything, but I mean, the message that we are trying to get at, you know, is there a reason why they picked this planet? Is it because we are really trying hard to, or they're trying really hard to assimilate us with you know, being the new kids on the block, so to speak, with life here on this planet?
Yeah, assimilate, not exactly. What they're trying to do is bring mankind as a race up to speed, because mankind has already left Earth. Okay, mankind is already tinkering at the fringes of a massive multi-universal society. And the answer to the question as to why this planet in particular is because in this sector, this planet holds the greatest diversity and the widest array of database available, plus of course that is available for research, for cataloging, plus the critical factor, somehow mankind, and this is the part they don't really understand, somehow mankind managed to figure out how to tap into what humans are calling zero-point energy. The ability to, by thought alone, manipulate the material world. Okay, so this is one of those aspects that has definitively got the off-worlders' attention. It's also one of the deciding factors that stops the off-worlders from conquering the planet and leaving it to mankind to interact and evolve. But that's their primary reason, and you know, I understand why I use the word assimilate, but it really does boil down to bringing them up to speed so they can function in the multi-universal community. That would be your primary reason for their interest. And of course, like I mentioned earlier, I think I mentioned tonight, the fact that the human genome is built on the triple helix makes it the most versatile species for the hybridization program, because they're able to utilize that odd configuration to culturally crossbreed any races. Okay. So I mean,
so in your point, then, Keith, are they trying to help us succeed, or are they trying to help us get to the point where we could be, let's say, trusted with the information that they have with this consortium?
Yes. In a nutshell, that is literally it. They are trying to give mankind the tools to be able to comprehend the advanced, even get the basics of the advanced technologies, so that as they interact with the species, with the other species with the advanced technologies, that mankind as a race can comprehend the basics of it enough to be taught. Okay, essentially teach them the technological language, if you will, so that they can become a productive. And when you talk about being trusted, absolutely, a productive, trusted group where, and let's be clear about the trust thing, it's a question of, if I tell you, don't touch this console, I can trust you to realize that touching that console is not that it's not, that it's, against the rules or anything. It's that if you don't know what you're touching, you could set something off that is really bad for everybody. And humans' curiosity streak is a dangerous thing because it's unfettered.
I don't know if you've been following the Tom DeLonge story about extraterrestrials and trying to bring disclosure south of the border. I realize that you're not someone who really follows the day-to-day news levels on it, but it's been all over social media, so I'll assume that you have seen something about it. But what, in essence, he is saying, Keith, is all aliens are bad. He's learned this from his government sources, that we should be very careful with aliens and any alien that comes into our planet. In fact, he goes as far as saying that they are scared of our nuclear weapons programs and we should arm space with nuclear weapons, if a chance we haven't already. What is your opinion on that?
Politely put, hogwash. Don't get me wrong. Not all aliens are nice. Not all aliens are congenial. Are all aliens dangerous? Not in the slightest. Are aliens afraid of mankind's nuclear arsenal? In 1986, the nuclear arsenal was wiped. It was shut down at a critical point. They're not worried. The off-worlders are not worried about it. Now, are the aliens worried about mankind's ability to manipulate zero-point energy? Certainly. But where Mr. DeLonge is talking about all aliens being evil and being dangerous and should be locked up, that's fear-mongering. The fact he qualifies it as getting it from his governmental sources may speak something to just exactly the veracity of what he's talking about. Because one government will say the same thing about another government. And I'm not talking just on this planet. I mean, even one world to another, they have the same sort of misinformation being handed out. So do I, as far as anything I'm aware of, frankly, if he's saying that essentially all aliens are evil and should be, euthanized, I suspect is what he's looking at. No, it's just flat out wrong. And again, it's in my opinion. I have no idea what other people's take on it. But I'm certainly not going to back that kind of thought process up. Frankly, in my case, I know too many of them that are nice.
Well, I wrote on my recent blog at spacedoutradio.com that it makes no sense to me, and maybe I am just looking at this a little bit naively here, Keith, but it makes absolutely no sense to me that the extraterrestrials, if, as DeLonge says, and other scholars have said that there have been extraterrestrials coming here for millennia, since way before Christ and everything along those lines. If they were that evil if they really wanted to take us over, Keith, if they really wanted to take mankind and enslave us or use us as a food source or whatever it is, even just destroy us, whatever it is, why would they wait until we were somewhat armed when they could have done it as little as 200 years ago, when in most countries the main weapon of source was still a spear and a bow and arrow?
Well, yeah, and that is one of the things I keep telling people. If the aliens, for whatever reason, wanted to wipe out the planet, okay, number one, it'd be done from orbit. Okay, they wouldn't bother. And I mean, one EMP pulse, it's over. Mankind's entire weapons array is gone. So it does not make any logistical sense to even consider that as a functional possibility. And when you get people as well placed as DeLong and many other scientists that I've heard of that are claiming categorically all aliens are evil, it's as bad as saying all aliens are good. Okay. It just does not make you take a look at somebody with that kind of scientific background making a categorical statement like that is absolutely ludicrous. But I absolutely agree with you on that. I mean, let's face it. Why wait until mankind has technologically evolved when they're so backwoods in the first place? But even so, why wait till they have even a possibility? Take them out when they were still living in caves. It would have been easier.
I agree, and that's the point I'm making. So, I mean, to me, it sounds like a lot of fear-mongering.
Oh, extremely. If you keep people afraid of aliens, then people will stay away from aliens. If you keep people afraid of white men or of North American Indians or of Japanese, if you keep the people afraid of them, they won't interact and find out how much is similar. Okay, and it is that similarity that unites places. You take a look at any situation at all. I mean, even if we staying on the, as you pointed out, staying on the ET side of it, even look back to the War of the Worlds, to the movie done way back in the 40s, I think, 30s, 40s, somewhere back there. People didn't think in terms of what color their neighbor was. All of a sudden, it was they were all human and these weren't. You don't have to, the whole catch, and most of it is being done by, sad to say, on this planet, it's done by humans in position of power that want to maintain their power base. If you keep people afraid of their neighbors, they won't realize how strong they are. You really want to get an idea of that one, take a look at the show A Bug's Life. It said it real clearly how well that works. So yeah, anytime you listen to somebody as categorical as that going, all aliens are evil, you really better take a step back and think things through as to whether that makes any functional sense.
It makes a lot of sense. Let's move on to BTO's question here. He says, Keith, are your ET connections limited to this galaxy, or have you connected with others all throughout this universe? And are they based on 4 dimensions or beyond?
Well, first and foremost, mine go multiversal, meaning I've got friends that have traveled to the far reaches of third dimensional space. And it's certainly not, some of the ones that I've dealt with, frankly, have never seen Earth. Now, as far as are they based in 4-dimensional, the answer is most of them, and I am talking the greater majority, are 3rd-dimensional. I do have contact with a few that are not from this dimension, but it's not like they physically come here or I physically go there. Okay, because now, if we if we modify that a little and look at different vibratory rates, there's a lot of them that are in a very different state of vibration, which is not the same thing as a difference in dimension. But do I have contact with people from different dimensions? The answer is yes. But we're certainly not dealing, if you will, with the terrestrial concerns of the Galactic Consortium. We're dealing with something much higher. And I don't mean more important. I just simply mean on a much different level of thought process.
Susan is asking, do hybrids blend in through certain industries, like the arts?
Oh, heavens, yeah. Hybrids can blend into the arts real easy because, well, frankly, if you look a little different in the arts, that means you're looking normal. It's so much easier to blend in the fashion industry, in the creative arts industries, even in the fine arts industries. It's very easy to get lost in it. In some of the higher level scientific areas, they can also blend in because some scientists, and I'll get flack from Preacher for this one, but sometimes scientists do have a tendency of looking a little out of kilter or off sync where it comes to the rest of society, because they do not have the social interactive capacity. So they look a little different, but it's far easier blending in with the arts, right? And that certainly does not mean that everybody out there that is that is in the creative fields is, shall we say, a hybrid. The ratios still hold,
All right, let's move on. This comes from Corey, who is asking, I used to see a quick split-second blue dot or flash, but lately I see a small blue line about 5 millimeters long. We're talking Canadian there, millimeters. And it stays for a second or two. What would that be?
Well, there's any number of things that could be. If we go with the off-world side of it, or the ET side of it, there are species that are that literally look like that. They will come in various different colors. Like there is one species that looks like little ribbons to the human eye. So it is quite possible, if we go with that one, you may be looking at ones that are starting to get comfortable with her, and therefore showing themselves a little more readily. But they're certainly not a threat. They're absolutely not a threatening race by any functional stretch.
All right.
Go ahead. I'm presuming that she looked into or did her own research on what the physical optical inference could be, such as little bits and odds and ends inside the eyeball.
I don't know. Let's get to Kevin's question, and you never know if it's Kevin or Kevin's beard that is actually answering the question or asking the question, because he's got a power beard going on. But he is asking, are all alien craft piloted by beings, or do they have drones like here on Earth?
Oh, there are certainly some that have drones. There's one in particular that it's quite often you'll see red, yellow, and blue lighting in a 3-point rotating, so in a 3-point light that is oscillating, that's spinning. That's a gray hybrid. That's a gray probe, and that is simply a scan. It's a remote control scanner. But they absolutely have drones. Drones, remote probes, call them what you will, but yeah, definitely.
All right. Let's get to John's question here. He says, I would like to think that if one were a hybrid, it would be very obvious that they are very different in many ways. After all, we already, as in humans, tend to make the minutest of distinctions to determine racial nuances.
And it is literally that reason why hybrids don't stand out. Because humans they have a tendency of looking at the wrong thing. Okay, they spot this little difference and they'll categorize somebody right off the bat. And, that's why hybrids don't exactly stand out, because humans are looking for... They are still caught up on the physical side, and where most hybrids stand out is their social interaction. And, there's an old saying that holds very true in many cases where, it's better to be thought a fool than to open your mouth and remove all doubt. Hybrids, you'll find, if they're having trouble socializing, won't say anything. Net result, and that does not mean that every shy person is a hybrid. And I know there's people that every time I say something, somebody's going to go, oh, that means this. No, it really doesn't. But no, the fact is if they stood out that easily, well, this is the logic side of it. There wouldn't be so many people asking how to tell what they look like. Make sense?
Absolutely, it makes sense. It amazes me that this topic tonight for hybrids has become so popular, because it's really something that we haven't really discussed with you on this show before. I mean, we've tapped on the subject, but never really got into it.
Yeah, I mean, and the funny thing is, we've been doing this, just over 2 years, I think? But the hybridization program is a phenomenal program. And it is, but this is just one other of those parts of what you're doing here, Dave, where you've opened so many doors up that people are now becoming really comfortable with the idea of talking about, at least in this, if you will, safe zone, asking some of the most insightful questions that many people are sitting on. Even when you go to the YouTube, and to the iTunes, where you've got people able to download, people are actually they're able to ask the questions so that other people can get the answers, and that's phenomenal. This is one of the reasons why I like keeping an eye on the chat room, and it's easier for me to spot it in Spreaker, primarily because of the fact that the writing on my screen is a whole lot bigger.
Let's move on to Wyatt's question, who is asking, how does one determine if an orb is alien or spirit? I had an orb sighting here at the house, and I don't know how to determine what it was.
By visual context, it's going to be a problem in all likelihood. Because they look on with the I'm going to call it with the inexperienced eye, they look very similar. Now, when you're dealing with spirit, more often than not, it's got more of a translucent feel to it, where you can actually, where there's nothing solid there to speak of, that you can actually, for instance, see the trees behind. If it's an alien ship, 99% of the time, what you'll see is parts of whatever's behind it disappearing, even with it being that small. But is there a totally viable way of determining it? No. Okay, and I'm certainly not the one to talk to about photographs of them to tell you, because tell you what photograph is what, because that's not my field of functionality anyway. But they look very similar. You know, and that's just the reality of it. Wish I could be more specific, but as far as I'm aware, from a visual standpoint, it's really not that easy. The one way that you might be able to tell them, depending on your own sensitivities, is the electromagnetic. Because there is a subtle difference between electromagnetic fields, which would be around alien technology, or biomagnetic, which is what comes off a spirit. But it's a very subtle difference, and simply put, very few people will tell the difference at all. You know, that's where somebody like Eric Cooper comes in handy, because he and Eric Markham have the technology, and I know there's other people out there with it, that can actually differentiate between the two types of fields.
Let's move on to Craig's question here. So we got about 6 minutes before we have to go to break. He's asking, Keith, would extraterrestrials agree our egos and perception need to take a back seat to our subconscious and higher self?
You want to run that by? Pardon me for being deaf, but
no, that's okay. Would extraterrestrials agree that our egos and perceptions here on Earth need to take a back seat to our subconscious and higher self?
Oh, okay. Just about the only ones functional that humans interact with are Pleiadians, and it's not so much they need to take a back seat to them as they need to learn to cooperatively work with them. Okay, but the off-worlders that are in contact with man, on the whole, the ego is something that is part of it. And rest assured, there are alien races that have their own egos that are jacked right up there along with mankind's. Some of them even higher. But it's more a question of which ones feel they have to be brought more into balance. But that's nothing against the humans. That's the same thing they look at with some of the other races. Make sense?
Well, let's see where it goes from here again. Okay, because I mean, there's so much going on with people. I mean, and there's so many people who believe that we're still the only ones here, man. You know, that doesn't make sense to a lot of people.
Well, yeah, and that is where we run into... This is something that actually Gene Roddenberry touched on. That trying to comprehend alien perceptions is going to be the biggest problem. You know, in interacting with them, in dealing with them. Humans have a staggering ego. But what makes humans human, one of the things that makes them human, is their ability to work with that ego in order to utilize it on the positive side to drive them to higher levels of attainment. That competitive streak, which comes straight out of the ego, is what drives many humans to push their own limits to become better at whatever they're doing. You know, so when you're looking at merging or at introducing another race into the consortium, the last thing you want to do is make that race like the rest of you. You know, like the rest of the people. It's not like, you know, they're not trying to mold humans into a consortium puppet. They're trying to teach humans how to interact with humans first, and then with the consortium races, so that humans are still humans. They still have their own quirks, their own societal perceptions, but they learn how to function. You know, they learn how to function inside the wider society. You know, it's kind of like what should have been done with many of the peoples on this planet. If you're trying to bring somebody into your society, not conquer them, not eradicate them, but make both societies better by sharing what's going on, you don't want to turn around and wipe out their drive. So no, they're not looking to push the ego to the back, because the ego is what drives man in the first place.
We only have about a minute and a half here with you. And let's get to Craig's question here. He says, are the short grays actual robots without pilot and walk-in modes?
No. The short grays are actually flesh and blood, born on their home planet or in orbit, depending on where they are. But they are a sentient race. There are certainly robots that have been built to look like grays, but the grays themselves, the short little grays themselves that all of it is based on, are flesh and blood. Okay, they are not any form of artificial, or, as some people will jump on, biological subcreation, biological robot. They are born and bred just like humans are born and bred as humans. Okay, now, have some people replicated grays and created robots that look very much like them? Certainly. No question there at all. Some people have built drones that look like them. But the race itself is real. They just have a different physical appearance, and the secondary gray race, the secondary evolutionary strain, is the controllers, which are a whole lot taller. To this day, I still say that the best movie to watch to get a real clear picture of the two types is literally at the end of the original Close Encounters of the Third Kind. That gives the best overall picture of them. But they are flesh and blood.
All right, my friend, I'm going to get you to hold on right there, because we are going to hop out for our second break of the night here on Spaced Out Radio. Our Keith Andrews is with us. Keith joins us the first Friday of every month with the ET Connection. It is something that we very much enjoy when Keith is in here to answer all of your questions when it comes to extraterrestrials, contact. We're also, in the next hour, going to get into downloads, because so many people say they're having these ET downloads. I want to know what they're all about. We'll find out more with Keith coming up in hour number 3 on Spaced Out Radio right after this.
We're getting strange on Saturday nights. Hi there, this is Dave Cruz, and each Saturday, starting at 9 p.m. Pacific, midnight Eastern, I will take you on a tour of the weird and obtuse on Spaced Out Saturdays, from aliens to Sasquatch and every tinfoil hat in between. We got you covered. Join us at spacedoutradio.com for Spaced Out Saturdays. See you there.
Not ready for bed on Saturday night? Right after Spaced Out Saturdays, hop on over to S4 with Corey Ruiz and me, Eric Cooper from Forest Moon Paranormal. With S4, there are no limits to what we try and uncover. From government conspiracies to helping clean up the paranormal, no topic is safe on S4. We get to the heart of the matter, of the subjects you want to learn more about. So tune in on S4 starting at midnight Pacific, 3 a.m. Eastern, only on spacedoutradio.com.
Have you had an experience you can't explain? Would you like someone you can trust to look into it? We have just the place. The SOR Sightlines Report is the place for you to find answers. Whether it's Bigfoot, UFOs, Dogman, ghosts, aliens, or anything strange, the Sightlines Report will get you connected with one of our expert researchers to find out what's going on. All of your personal information is kept 100% confidential. The SOR Sightlines Report, a place for you to find the answers you need. Only at spacedoutradio.com.
Hi there. I'm Butch Witkowski, lead investigator with U4COP. On the final Monday of every month, you can listen to me and host Dave Scott on Spaced Out Radio's Strange Days. We're going to get to the heart of the matter when it comes to what's happening out there. People are seeing and experiencing things from ET contact to Bigfoot, and I want to hear about it. Your experiences are what we investigators need to help solve these unknown mysteries. So tune in at spacedoutradio.com to the final Monday of every month from Butch Witkowski's Strange Days.
This is Eric Markham, news editor for the Spaced Out Radio's The Encounter Online. We have put together a great team of writers and journalists from all over the world to bring you top-quality paranormal stories, from alien encounters to the latest conspiracies. You won't find any of that fake news here. True stories and top-notch reporting as we look to bring these experiences to the mainstream. The Encounter Online, only at spacedoutradio.com.
Do you want to know the truth? Do UFOs exist? Are aliens real? Are the governments hiding the biggest secret in history? We're UFO seekers, and we're on a hunt for the truth. Subscribe to our YouTube channel and follow along with us as we journey across the United States, visiting UFO hotspots and alien hotspots, trying to document the UFO phenomenon. Catch us on Spaced Out Radio every third Monday of the month as we discuss Area 51, UFOs, and more. And also, don't forget to subscribe to us on YouTube.
Patrolling the Pacific Northwest, we are always on the lookout for the strange and unassuming stories that real people are experiencing. Hi, I'm Vincent Zunza from Pacific North Weird. Me and Alexandra Sullivan have teamed to bring to you those odd stories that never seem to make it into the mainstream. Stories so weird that will leave you scratching your head wondering, is this real? It's as real as it gets with Pacific North Weird. You can watch our videos right here at spacedoutradio.com.
Become more intimate and interactive with Spaced Out Radio. Join our Space Travelers Club with your new membership. For $5 a month, we'll provide you with special access to the website, monthly prize draws from books to psychic readings, along with monthly newsletter, private interviews, and more. Sign up today to be part of Spaced Out Radio's experience.
Looking for a place to advertise at a very reasonable cost? Look no further than Spaced Out Radio. SpacedOutRadio.com has an advertising tab that you can click to check out our daily, weekly, and monthly packages to play on the radio, or our website including social media. From commercial spots to banners, we have it all. Check out our competitive pricing today.
Don't have time to listen to Spaced Out Radio live? Wherever you are, the car, the office, the shower, or even if you're traveling, we're right here for you. Each Spaced Out Radio show can be found on iTunes, TuneIn, and on our YouTube channel, Spaced Out Radio Show. It's the perfect way for you to catch up on our shows. For more information, just head over to our website, spacedoutradio.com, and tune in to us today.
You hear footsteps in the empty room above you. A rocking chair begins rocking by itself. Don't be afraid of the things that go bump in the night. Reach for Spirit Storybox, the iPhone app the Huffington Post UK called the only ghost hunting app you will ever need. Spirit Storybox. The spirits are telling their stories. Are you listening?
Strange creatures lurking in the night, the sounds of wood knocking in the forest, odd happenings right out of a fictional world. These are the reports I love. Hi there, this is author Ronald Murphy, and I would love it if you join me and Spaced Out Radio host Dave Scott the second Wednesday of every month on our journey into the unknown land of cryptozoology at spacedoutradio.com. From Mothman to Frogman and everything in between. Hey, they don't call me the crypto guru for nothing.
It's Cosmic Sundays with me, Elizabeth Anglin, in Cosmic Passport. Let me take you down a 3-hour spiritual journey where we will get into everything from ET contact to Psychic Sundays. It's a journey of listening and learning together with some of the best professionals in their fields. You can tune in to Cosmic Passport at spacedoutradio.com every Sunday, starting at 9 p.m. Pacific, midnight Eastern.
The views and opinions expressed by tonight's guest and topic of discussion do not necessarily represent the official policy or position of Spaced Out Radio, Spaced Out Weekend, Spaced Out Radio Limited, its hosts, syndicated carriers, or anyone associated with this broadcast. You're listening to Spaced Out Radio with Dave Scott. Follow Dave on Twitter at Spaced Out Radio and hashtag Spaced Out Radio, and on Facebook Spaced Out Radio Show. Now, back to the program.
Welcome back to the third and final hour of Spaced Out Radio tonight. I am your host, Dave Scott. Great to have you with us. Tomorrow night on the program, it's Spaced Out Saturday with Dave Cruz, and on Sunday, Elizabeth Anglin is back with Spaced Out Sunday's Cosmic Passport. Both shows get going at 9 p.m. Pacific, midnight Eastern Time at spacedoutradio.com. We want to welcome in everyone listening in on WQEE 99 Rock the Key down in Noonan, Georgia, home of The Walking Dead. We are live as well on the United Public Radio Network, 107.7 FM in New Orleans and over 160 countries around the world. Thank you for tuning us in. We are also live on KTLK, The Fringe FM, Renegade Talk Radio out of Las Vegas. And if you're listening in on Revolution Radio, remember the Double R Machine is a donation station financed by you, the valued listener. Head on over to freedomslips.com and donate today. Bill Cardwell has set the password for tonight in the SOR Space Travelers Club, Eperogenesis. Eperogenesis is your password. Make sure you use it wisely, Space Travelers, as Bill sets the password each and every night right here on the mighty SOR. Now, if you want to follow us on social media, you can do so on Twitter at Spaced Out Radio. You can use the hashtag Spaced Out Radio if you want to connect live with me during the show as well. Give our Facebook page a like, Spaced Out Radio Show. You can also join us for live chat during the show in the SOR Space Travelers group. We are also on Instagram, Dave Scott, SOR. Our brand new YouTube channel, Spaced Out Radio, it is replacing Spaced Out Radio Show, which has been compromised, so we're changing channels on that one. Please subscribe to that. We're also on iHeartRadio in the United States, TalkStream Live. Tune us in on TuneIn, download and subscribe to our shows on iTunes. Our website is spacedoutradio.com, where we have a plethora of features for you, including joining the SOR Space Travelers Club for $5 a month. You can rock out to Bumblefoot, shop at our Spaced Out Radio store. You can also watch UFO Seekers, contact TV videos, and read The Encounter online, and so much more. Everything at spacedoutradio.com. Tonight, for the final time, we introduce our Keith Andrews to the show. The first Friday of every month, Keith comes on to discuss what we call the ET connection around these parts. Keith, welcome back.
Thank you very much. I do appreciate it, and welcome to all the listeners. And I'll tell you, the questions tonight, Dave, have just been out of this world, pardon the pun.
Well, it has been a fantastic night, and it's been very active in the chat rooms and on Twitter. We always love to see the interaction from the audience as we continue on with the show tonight. So I want to say thank you to our great audience all around for participating live during the show. You guys make it so much fun. It is fantastic to be able to go through this and see what everybody is up to. Now, Keith, one of the topics that we've never discussed with you, and I have heard it so much over the last year from people on talking to myself on social media or on the phones or just looking on places like Facebook or Twitter, we keep hearing this thing about downloads. That aliens are downloading information to us so that way we can reach a higher self and higher consciousness. I'm not sure I really believe in that. I believe in a lot of this stuff that is going on. But the downloads just seem a little too odd, and at points for me, it seems like people are just seeking more attention to try and raise themselves above everybody else who has had contact. That's the way I personally feel about it. I'm not dissing anybody who has, but I just haven't been proven, that these downloads are actually taking place. What do you think about downloads?
Well, downloads on the whole, and like you, I'm not about to say people aren't getting them. I've been hearing about it since I was a child. And they are, I won't say that that some off-worlders are not using, are not using them, but the majority of so-called downloads are when somebody's consciousness reaches a certain level, when their ability to comprehend what they're working with, and it's kind of like all of a sudden you get a wake-up call that says, here it is. Right. Now, downloads, as a matter of fact, thinking back on it, I'm actually, once in a while it does happen. where an actual off-world download happens. Okay, I was actually the recipient of one when I was at the Experience Your Speak conference, where I literally had a chunk of information come in of an extremely high technological level that I jotted it down and actually went and talked to a scientist there about what I got, because I didn't understand entirely what I was looking at. But the majority of downloads are, first and foremost, there when somebody's consciousness, when their own spiritual level or their own intellect oftentimes gets to a point that you all of a sudden, if you will, get it. The one thing I will say that, so to speak, speaks to your idea that they just want attention. That many people just want attention. So, I've been getting downloads. Ask yourself this: if the person claiming to get a download is still behaving in a stupid fashion, as in the same way they were behaving before the so-called download, the odds are they didn't get a download. Because a download, especially if it's coming from an off-worlder, will not be something that is just, you need to change your dress code, right? Or you need to clean up your act and watch your language. You're just not going to get that kind of information from them, right? But many people that claim so-called downloads, there's no functional change in their behavior except a claim that they are more spiritually aware, and yet no physical, no behavioral evidence, which speaks to your concept that many of them are looking for a way to make themselves look better or feel better, and many times it's a self-esteem issue. If I have a download, then I've got a reason for not being quite as socially adept. I'm a firm believer I'm socially adept. I'm socially inept. It's not a question for me of am I going to put my foot in my mouth. It's a question of how I'm going to get the other one in there with it. But if you're getting an actual downloads from off-worlders are going to be, on the whole, of a technological nature that goes beyond your understanding. Okay, or beyond your previous understanding, maybe a better way of putting it. Or it will have some critical impact. When we're talking about the spiritual downloads, those are awareness cycles that happen kind of like when you're studying something and all of a sudden you get it. And, the rest of it just sort of makes sense. Does that make sense?
Absolutely. This leads to Craig's question. He says, what's the difference then between downloads and dream or spaceship teachings?
Well, the difference between a download and a spaceship teaching would be proximity. If you're getting taught on a spaceship, you're there. And other than that, frankly, from a functional standpoint, there isn't one. Dreams are often, especially if they don't add up to much of anything, are often just that. They're your subconscious trying to help your conscious figure out how to function based on the information the subconscious was picking up. But there is no, especially from the experiential standpoint of it, there's no functional difference between a download, aside from, like I said, a download sometimes, and this is where it gets into a gray area, sometimes a dream can be very much like a download, in as much as you wake up remembering remembering the answer to something, or remembering a piece of history that you just hadn't personally researched, right? But you wake up with it, because a dream bridges the gap between the conscious and the subconscious. A download is fed straight into the subconscious and bleeds back out. That's where the access point is. So that's where the similarity is between the two. I hope that makes sense.
Let's get to Eric's question here. He says, Keith, what do you think of the first artificial intelligence robot that was recognized as a human in Saudi Arabia? And do you believe that was an off-world implant?
Well, number one, this is actually the first I've heard of it. But that's okay. I was expecting it to surface sooner or later. I heard they were working on him over in Japan. But that said, number one, it was bound to happen, and I don't have a problem with it personally. Number two, was it an off-world implant? Certainly not. I know of one race that is mechanically evolved, and rest assured, if that was the people that actually set this thing down here, well, let's just say we'd have a whole other set of problems, and you wouldn't be worrying about whether the flesh and blood aliens were here. Because the mechanoids are a whole lot less congenial than you might think. But they're not here right now anyway. So, for mankind, for a human government to give citizenship to an AI does speak volumes towards where human technology has evolved to. And like I said, this feels, from my standpoint, it's a human development. It's a human construct. It's not something the ETs turned over, because the ETs are trying to get humans to evolve, not build another race. And I'm talking socially evolved.
Follow-up question from Craig. How can he then tell the difference between downloads or past life memories?
Well, that becomes a little complicated. And the kind of reverse question to that is, does it really matter? The reason I ask is because there are societies that were evolved way beyond what human society is right now. Okay. The real question is not to try and differentiate where the information comes from, so much as to decide what to do with it. Because it's very difficult. Quite frankly, I guess the best way to put it, one of the major differences would be, with a past life memory, the emotions that go with it are appropriate and age, like personal age and period specific. Okay. Whereas a download or even a spiritual awakening won't have the emotional bond behind it. Prime example, when I got the download for a piece of technological equipment. And the only thing exciting about it was, well, I hadn't looked at that before. I got to build one. But there was no emotion to it. On the flip side, there are certain past lives that when my memories come back, well, let's just say there's a whole lot of emotion that goes with them, and not all of it nice. Of course, not all my lifetimes were nice. But that's the easiest way, is if there's an emotional feeling tied to it, then like an age or a period of appropriate emotional feeling, then you're dealing with a past life or with a memory, not a download.
How long do these downloads take?
In all fairness, a matter of minutes. Okay. There really isn't, people that say, oh, I've been getting downloads for the last 2 days. Highly, highly, highly unlikely. Most downloads, like the one I got, for instance, took almost 15 minutes, but it kept repeating itself. The actual download itself was maybe a minute and a half long, if that. Right? But in order for me to get it written down, because I immediately went to write it down, it kept repeating itself long enough for me to get it written. And that's why I say they're a very short spurt. Make sense?
I can see that, but what information are they sending? And I guess what doesn't make sense to me, and I don't mean to put a status on this, but I really don't understand why they would give downloads to the local gas station attendant or bingo hall caller or whomever, even doing what I'm doing, radio show host, when they could be giving it to politicians or people of influence to try and, improve things, on a spiritual or Zen-like level. And I'm not buying this figure, Keith, that every politician is corrupt.
Oh, neither will I. I will absolutely not buy that figure. Every politician, it's a very select few politicians, in all fairness, that are corrupt. The system's screwy, but the politicians themselves, on the whole, are decent people. Okay. But the answer to your question, because we could go really sideways on that one, but the answer to your question, or the audience question, the reason for giving information to JQ public is because they originally started giving the information to the politicians, to the governments of the world. They made contracts with the governments, with various governments around the world, and virtually without exception, those contracts were broken by the humans. So they turned the next step and tried turning the information over to the corporations and to the big business, the people that had not the political clout, but had the social clout. Going, well, we'll try and get it through them because the politicians aren't doing it. For whatever reason, I'm not pointing fingers at politicians on the whole, but the ones that were in the control seats at the time, for whatever their reasons, weren't passing them on. So they turned to the corporations, who turned out to be more interested in the money they could make off it than they were in actually releasing the information to JQ public. Okay, so when that failed, they have turned to the general public, to just sporadic people that are open. And sometimes the downloads come in. It's almost like, you know how with the old ham radio, people would sit there and they go, and I forget the lingo on it, but they'd call out to anybody out there just to try and make a connection. And the first person that picked up the phone, or picked up the ham radio was the guy you talked to. That is another method of this information getting out. And by the way, that's not usually sanctioned by any of the off-worlders. That's usually JQ public of the off-worlders going, gee, I want to pass this information out because I don't think it should be kept from them. But that's the reason that they're going to, mom and pa's grocery store clerk. Of course, 9 times out of 10, the guy sitting in that position or the girl sitting in that position has no clue who to talk to pass it on. Kind of the catch-22 on the whole thing.
Let's get to Catalina's question. She is asking, I get high-pitched ringing in my ears. Was told they were downloads. Now I count how long they last. Do you think the time matters? Well, I can tell you this. I've been having ringing in my ears for like 3 weeks right now. It's probably tinnitus, just so you know.
9 times out of 10 it is. Once in a while, the easiest way to figure out if it is tinnitus, tinnitus, however you want to pronounce it, the easiest way to tell is if it's going on in your ears and you literally thank them, and you can do this in your own head, thank them for slowing it down. Okay, though if it isn't tinnitus, then what you're looking at is it will slow down. The pitch will shift. You may have to ask multiple times to get them to slow down. For people that are, my age, it's kind of like trying to listen to a standard 33 record on 78, or above. And if it's an actual message, you ask them to slow it down, it'll bring it down to a level that it can be heard. But if it's tinnitus, you can ask all you want, it ain't going to change pitch. Makes sense?
This leads to Shar's question. Hi, Shar. Do you have to get an implant to have a download? Can you share what the downloads are?
Number one, no, you certainly do not require a implant for a download. Okay, even from an off-world download, because what it is they attune it to the biomagnetic flux. Basically, they attune it to your brainwaves. So it does not, because they're not trying to communicate, they are simply trying to broadcast. Okay, and because there is no trackable way for it, if you want to share it, knock yourself out. But it falls under the same category as the hybridization program. Don't be surprised if it's looked down upon or if people don't believe where it came from or whatever. You know, there's any sort of thing, any number of things that may happen to go that way.
All right. Do you think these downloads are reminiscent of what people are seeing on ayahuasca or any other sort of psychedelic drug?
You know, quite frankly, some of them probably are. And, you know, I've heard tell, and of course I never got into it myself. It was one of the few bright things I did at that point in my life. But from what I understand, you get onto acid and you can have flashback decades later, even if you only had one hit to start with. And it will seem at that point like a download, and it may be nothing more than a flashback. You know, but again, we're looking at possibilities. I really don't have a definitive, a definitive issue or a definitive answer as to exactly what all the variables are or all the variations are as to how they can come about. But there's certainly no regulation on what you do with a download, unless, of course, in said download, you also get with it the attachment to it, if you will, that says, don't tell anybody, this is for your use. You know, at which point, karmic law steps in and says, well, they asked you not to, don't.
All right, let's get to this comment from Kelly. I know he's an ET contactee, and I think this is important. He says this in the Spaced Out Radio SOR Space Travelers Club on Facebook. He says, as far as his downloads are concerned, they came in holographically. For instance, the first one was a large triangle with hundreds of other geometric patterns intertwined within. Like a holograph appeared out of nowhere, like 3 inches from his face, then flew forward at him suddenly. Literally, the next day after he awakened in the morning, there was a noticeable difference in his thoughts and perceptions of what was going on around him. He had a total of 3 what he considers holographic downloads that happened within a 3 or 4 month period in 2014. Does this sound very familiar, Keith?
It sounds very familiar, and it sounds like it's a definitive. Like, this is one of those odd ones, and it is a rare one. He should be, in my eyes, he should be really grateful for it. But this one is one of those few that sounds very, strikingly like an off-world download, where they relied on the optical, because of the holographic image in front of him. That is clearly, from my perspective, that's an off-world style download, and the fact that it had a direct recognizable change to him, never mind anybody else, says it was more than just a mild wake-up call, as it were. Now, of course, the question that begs asking at that point, and he certainly doesn't have to answer this, but the important factor with a download of that caliber, or with a series of downloads, and it would make sense that it was spread out over months, to give time for each one to take seat, to take root. But the real critical question is to make sure he's doing something functional with said download. And if he doesn't know what to do with it, well, this is where I open my mouth and go, he can certainly drop me a line and we'll figure out what to do with it. Yeah, because oftentimes downloads don't make a lot of sense until you start piecing them together. Does that make sense?
Well, it makes sense, but I'm still struggling with the idea of what people are getting and what these are for. I mean, it's great, and I'm not putting down Kelly for this, because I think this guy is real. He has had some major experiences here. But when I hear someone say they're getting things holographic and they can't quite translate it, is that the human mind that can't translate these downloads, or is it the fact that we have to decipher the energy or the message? I'm not getting it. Like, it's just not adding up for me, man.
Oh, that's not a problem. And the fact that you're willing to ask is a testament to your integrity, quite frankly. You're not claiming to know it all. God knows that I don't know it all. But the reason, the question you're referring to, or the answer to what you're asking, is quite frankly, number one, it's the human mind can sort it out, but the human intellect, in other words, what the individual has learned to understand and has educated themselves on, can create an impediment. Okay. Like an impediment in understanding. The brain will sort it out, but the educational background or the life experience background of the individual receiving it may be running into problems. Okay, that's where you can get the discrepancy, because the mind will sort it out without, like the actual brain, the mechanical thing, if you will, biomechanical, can translate it without a problem. But oftentimes when you're dealing with that, it does require the insight of somebody in a different field from you simply to understand it. Okay, prime example, when I was handed the information on the piece of technology, it was talking in terms of magnetics. Well, I was lucky. There was a scientist in the room that happened to know magnetics, so I could get the information I needed from him without going and trying to find it elsewhere. But like you said, Kelly's gone through some phenomenal things, and like I said, this one does feel, especially with the impact points, as in it had for him an immediate altering effect on his perceptions, on how he was processing things, is clearly indicative of a download. Where it would become more akin to simply an awakening is, number one, no holograph, and number two, it would be in a field that there was no question around what it meant. Because it would have that sense of familiarity, not this all of a sudden, well, what the heck is this? Oh, and the other thing, of course, is with a download, the fact it came in sections, and there was a period of time between the downloads, does lend credence to the concept that it was a deliberate download, not just opening a floodgate where all of it would come at once. Does that make more sense to you there, Dave?
Absolutely. Eric is asking, do the holographic downloads require an implant?
No. They really don't. They don't even require eyesight, because they're a broadcast download. The reason for implants is because you're supposed to be sending information back, usually biological information. With a download, they're not interested in getting the information back because they don't usually even bother tracking whether the email was opened, if you will. Because most of the time, more often than not, an actual download is a broadband download to see if anybody can pick it up, or to see if anybody does pick it up.
This leads to Craig's question. What if it's an experience of pure love, then a feeling you're left with that takes months to figure out? Is that possible?
Is it possible? Is it possible to take months to sort it out after you get the download? Absolutely. And again, that falls under the category of whether or not the individual experience of the recipient is up to the task of understanding what was downloaded in the first place. If you download for instance, and I forget what the heck this is for, but if you download the quadratic formula into a kindergartner, it may take them some time to figure out what that formula means. They may be able to write it down, but they're not likely to know what it actually means or what it's for. So if you're getting that kind of information, it can certainly take months to sort it out, especially if it's a lot of information.
I learned something last weekend.
Oh, bonus.
And I haven't had a chance to discuss it with you as we change topics here. And I'm curious to get your thoughts. I was chatting with a member of the RCMP, and we started talking about UFOs. And I said, what do you guys do on a UFO call? What's the protocol? This gentleman said to me that if it is in the sky, their first call is to NORAD. And NORAD then will send a couple of CF-18s to try and intercept the UFO. If it's on the ground, they have no protocol. They will come out and investigate. And if the craft is still there, they will call the military in, or probably NORAD again. I think what kind of blindsided me, Keith, with that conversation, and I'm paraphrasing what it was.
Right.
I think the thing that really caught me with that was NORAD, being the Northern Organization of Radar Air Defense, is a joint Canadian-U.S. program. And I never really knew up until that point, I don't know why, maybe it was naivety and a border that separates the two countries, but I never really knew that the U.S. had access to all UFO contacts that come in through the RCMP, which means that they are controlling whatever happens with the UFO phenomenon in Canada. Did you know that?
Honestly, no, but it doesn't surprise me. Because, let's face it, but it is one of these issues that, thankfully, in my eyes, they've actually got a unified front on. Because, let's face it, UFOs don't really concern themselves too much with borders, and it does affect everybody. If everybody would work together, that'd be great. But the fact that the U.S. is getting the information first, the question that goes hand in hand with that, in my eyes, is how many Canadians are tied into the NORAD system, of the appropriate levels, and it goes to NORAD, but inside NORAD, does it go to the U.S. side, or does it go to Canadian operatives inside NORAD? Would be the other part of the equation that we may never have the answer to.
I think it was a little surreal for me. It was a little surreal to find out that information, because it seems so close yet so far away, if that makes any sense.
Absolutely it does.
And it just seems like, wow, they as in the American government, when it comes to disclosure and whatever else we've talked about on this show, really comes down to them controlling the airspace of North America and knowing what is going on at all times.
Absolutely. And I can certainly understand why that's disconcerting for you. I'm probably not the right person as far as the impact perspective goes, but I absolutely agree with you regarding the fact that the U.S. are the first people that get caught. Well, the NORAD, hopefully, and I've got no knowledge of this myself, so bear with that side of it, but hopefully it's a relatively even split where it comes to NORAD itself, as far as the people that work in NORAD being a relatively even split between United States and Canada. And for that matter, if it's North American, hopefully Mexico's involved at the same capacity. But that's that's just sort of a question that sits there in my mind, and I've got no information to back to give any insight into one way or the other.
Well, just looking at the chat rooms and seeing what people are saying, which isn't much right now about this topic, but to me, especially being Canadian, it kind of gives me the heebie-jeebies a little bit, that if I report something, that it is going into, the files of the U.S. government, when in reality, I don't think it should. Now, I could see them sharing files because that's kind of what happens, with NORAD. That's part of the agreement. And I'm not saying that I don't understand why it's not done, but I'm wondering now, how much control does the United States then have with UFOs in Canada's airspace?
And that's an excellent question. I think one of the reasons it doesn't surprise me that much, as much as it did you, is because 2 years ago I had the CIA show up on my doorstep asking about what I knew about the UFOs. Now for the CIA to know where I live, it's not like I'm some bigwig in Canada. Right, actually it'd be no longer than that because it was before I was on the radio, like before I was on here. Right, so it must be 3 years ago now. When the CIA showed up on my doorstep, I was not very vocal in any field. And for them to pop in and land on my actual residential doorstep and go, "We want to talk to you." Right. Mm-hmm. I think that's why it doesn't surprise me that they've got their fingers in the cookie jar up to the elbow.
Mm-hmm. Well, for sure. For sure. It just, I don't know. I've been uneasy about that. Maybe I should. Maybe I'm making a mountain out of a molehill here in regards to the situation, but it just really did not sit well with me to learn about this.
Which I can, like I said, I can certainly empathize with you on that aspect of it.
Mm-hmm.
Because, it begs the question of how much else have they got their fingers into that, the Canadian population, and for that matter, the U.S. population, doesn't necessarily know about.
Well, it does make you think. It does make you think whether or not there is something to it. It really does make you question whether or not there is some sort of ploy going on in order to gather the information freely towards the UFO subject.
Yeah, and that's absolutely, it certainly raises questions. There's no question, there's no doubt there. And you kind of go with it and go, well, at this point, I sort of sit back and go, well, what are you going to do with that anyway, even if they are? But that doesn't lessen the question.
Mm-hmm. No, I get that. So is it even worth for a Canadian to report something to the RCMP in your position, in your thoughts then?
Well, the answer is definitively yes. Regardless of when, it's going to NORAD, which NORAD is supposedly an interactive, it's an agreement between the countries of North America. Therefore, it's still getting to the people that have that sort of have their fingers on the pulse. And better to report it to somebody than to nobody. And that's in my opinion. People can do with that what they will.
Mm-hmm. Well, the problem that I see with that is, where's the independence of it all? We don't know if MUFON is infiltrated on either side of the border. We don't know if We don't know if that is getting into the hands of the government. We don't know. I mean, we definitely know now that any RCMP report, as it probably should, goes up to the military, but it goes into U.S. hands right away if they have to call NORAD.
Well, I can answer one question for you that you just brought up regarding has MUFON been infiltrated? The answer is unequivocally, from my personal experience, yes. I've spoken to enough well-placed MUFON people where their superiors have asked them to rewrite a case that they personally closed and said, no, it's a legitimate UFO. And their superiors have come back and said, no, you're going to rewrite this and tag it as this explanation. Now, when you get the senior people coming in and telling the actual hands on the, feet on the ground, boots on the ground people to rewrite their report so that it doesn't say that it's an unexplained, it's been infiltrated. Okay. And again, that's just what I found out. I obviously don't have any paperwork proof, but it falls, in my opinion, under the same category as the officer that you were talking to that flat out said, yeah, the information goes to NORAD. First call first. But as far as the independent side of it goes, this is one of those situations where doing the work independently is somewhat limiting anyway, where you need the added people to know. This is something that, what the heck was his name? Bud Hopkins found was by collecting all the information, he could cross-reference it and get more information from individuals, because there were a number of cases that he ran into where the information that the people had of the abductions was cross-correlated and it was cross-verified through many different eyes. So you have to report it to somebody if you want to get the information out there. You follow my reasoning?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I can understand that the information has to get out there, but I can tell you this. I would think twice now about reporting it to the RCMP if I know that information is not staying in Canadian hands.
Well, let me ask you this. Just playing the devil's advocate.
Yeah.
Which is so much better than playing what I've been called. But from your perspective, let's assume for a moment it's just going straight to the States. From the perspective of being able to report it to somebody, and I certainly don't want to get into a complete sidetrack here, but is there a critical problem if they're the ones, bearing in mind we're talking NORAD, which is a joint venture, at least on paper and in the public's eye it is, it's still going to Canadian people, but is there a problem sending it to, if you knew it was going to NORAD, yes, but was being handed over to Canadians inside NORAD, would that make you feel better?
See, and my issue is we don't know if it's going the other way as well. Are we getting the stories that need to be told maybe for our own defense if it is, say, malevolent? Right?
Well, I sort of have to surmise, since it's going in, and this is just extrapolation on my part, but if it's all being reported into NORAD, and we have to at least assume it's a reasonable assessment, that they're reporting to NORAD as well, then theoretically, bear in mind that it is a North American arrangement, then by definition that should put the information in Canadian hands as well, like the same information. But are we ever going to know? Heck, you don't know what the government's up to, never mind what they're up to.
Well, I found it interesting nonetheless.
Absolutely.
We only have about 9 minutes left with you, my friend. It's flown by tonight.
Holy mackerel.
Absolutely it has. It's been a long, fun show, and I want to say appreciate you coming back on again for that. Do you think that over the next month or so, let's say by the end of the year, because we only got about a month and a half, just over a month and 3/4 left in this year, do you see a lot more people as it gets closer to holidays and people start sitting down and maybe thinking a little bit more that, that they relax enough to try and get those downloads?
I really don't know if you'll find a real major influx of that, primarily because of the fact that it's been going on for this long and it hasn't had a functional impact thus far. I'm certain that that your listeners are certainly going to be paying a little more attention to it, especially after tonight's discussion. But on the whole, I wouldn't be personally expecting a whole lot of shift as far as people going looking for it. Because it's one of those things that some people talk about, some don't. Aside from the ones that we're listening in tonight.
Well, it's going to be interesting to see what happens. We've covered a lot of topics tonight in regards to downloads, hybrids. The hybrids one kind of surprised me a little bit.
Yeah, I've got a sneaking suspicion we're going to have to come back and revisit that one in the not-too-distant future.
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely we will. And we discussed children who were contacted. We also discussed the abduction phenomena that you said is picking up. Well, let's round it up here as we recap. Do you see these types of experiences with abductions continuing in the high numbers
Quite
through
frankly,
the remainder
yes.
of the year?
Yeah, I really do, because and the reason for that is the increase in global tensions, because this brewing tension right now that is both being brought about by the war issue and by the natural disasters is a societal egg breaker, if you will. It's either going to drive man into the next evolutionary phase, societally speaking, evolutionary step, or it's going to send it back into the Stone Age. In all fairness, likely back into the 1800s, but you get the idea. So it's that kind of that's why it's of such it's such an exciting time from a xenosociological standpoint that, that the off-worlders have increased the rate of abduction. You'll notice that it's not so much a rate of contact that's increased, so much as the abduction side of it.
Well, it's something that we are going to have to monitor, because if we're starting to get an increase in these abductions, do we know if they are more malevolent or benevolent? Are we getting any reaction to what they're like?
I'm finding from my personal experience, I'm finding it's more disconcerting. In other words, the people that are talking to me are caught off guard by it. But once you get them past that panic state of it happening, it seems to still be almost a neutral approach. It doesn't seem to be either malevolent or benevolent. But the shock of it is where most people are having the trouble. So I don't see a major shift happening on that end. Now, other people may be seeing something else.
I'm curious, and I forgot to ask you this earlier, Keith. With the increase in abductions, is it usually an increase by a certain species, or is it just in general a group effort?
It's in general, it's a group effort. This seems to be done by the number of species involved and the similarities in the abductions. I'd be inclined to say that it's a consortium itself that has, if you will, chosen to, authorize the increase. Okay, now the Greys are the ones that are handling a lot of it, but the specifics behind the abductions seem to be too multiracial, and yet with the same protocol, if you will, to be a wide array of races, like of doctrine, if you will.
So it's not just, say, one group that is all of a sudden picking up their own level of studies.
No, this seems to be a wide range. And it seems to, like I said, what I got told when I got looking into it, through my contacts, was that it's because of the increase, because society is reaching that breaking point where society either gets its act together and flourishes, or begins one heck of a downhill slide, and it's up to man, it's up to the humans on this planet as to which way it does that. So they're looking at the genetic impact of the societal implications.
Is there a lot of mind control that goes along with that?
Only human to human. And that's more subliminal. But you're asking, are the off-worlders doing some sort of massive shift? And no, they're not. The only increase would be because of the increase in the frequency of abductions. There's an increase, obviously, in the screening process, because they have to do it more often. As in the over-screening, that is. But as far as mind control, as in the off-worlders trying to dominate people and make them do stupid things, there's a lot of people that claim, I did it because I was told by such and such an alien. 99% of the time, that's pointing the finger at somebody else, so you don't have to actually take responsibility for your actions. And I'm referring to the people that do stupid things, not the people that are just having trouble adjusting.
Well, we're down to our final minute here on the show tonight. Keith, what are you up to, and where can people find your new YouTube channel?
Well, my new YouTube channel is literally at R. Keith Andrews. Figured I'd keep it simple. You guys, that was actually why I picked it. And of course, email, you can find me at innervoiceenterprises@yahoo.ca. And on Facebook, you can find me at Ronald Keith Andrews. And of course, I'm pretty certain that if you contact Dave, he'll get you in touch with me. And of course, the other one is Skype. I'm InnerVoice111. And of course, the easiest thing to look at, anytime I've got a picture, 9 times out of 10, you'll find the wooden carving of a UFO that I use as my picture, or part of the picture, because I figure it's something that nobody else has.
Well, my friend, our next visit with you will be on Friday, December 1st. Already.
Fantastic. Talk about a fast night. And Dave, thanks so much. I could not do
problem,
this.
Buddy.
I really couldn't handle the number of questions coming in or track them. I'm still trying to figure out how you do it.
Well, you know what? You make it easy for me, my friend. You make it easy because all I have to do is watch the chat rooms while you speak. So it works very easy for me. Very easy for me in order to get her done. So thank you so much. Keith, you hold on. I'm going to wrap this show up. I want to say thank you to an amazing week on Spaced Out Radio this past week. Next week is going to be fantastic as well, starting on Monday, where Jason Mathis comes in to talk about the Coral Castle, a topic I've wanted to do many a times on this show. We got Mr. Ron Bumblefoot THAL rocking in the background with Little Brother Is Watching. Bumblefoot is the official music of Spaced Out Radio. Tomorrow night on the program, Dave Cruz is here with Spaced Out Saturdays. Then on Sunday, Elizabeth Anglin's back with Spaced Out Sundays, Cosmic Passport. It's going to be a great weekend of entertainment. Well, like I said, I am back on Monday as well. I want to thank my great team, Everett and Eric on the Encounter, and their team, Amy, who is doing our syndication. We got Tim and Jolene on the internet, Bob with the amazing voice who intros our shows, and Catherine on social media. You guys have been absolutely fantastic this week. But most of all, I want to say all of my thanks to our great audience, especially those on Twitter who keep getting shadow banned, and in the Spreaker and Facebook on the SOR Space Travelers group. You guys were amazing. Thank you for hanging out with me all week, participating, having some great chat and conversation and snark. You make it fun. And all of you at home who don't get into the chat rooms or you download this show, I appreciate you taking the time. We are growing bigger and better every day thanks to your efforts. Because together, my friends, we own the night. I will talk to you on Monday. I hope you join us again. Mr. Bumblefoot, we need a favor. We need you to take us home. Have a good weekend. I'm out. Good night.